You're right.
Welcome, everyone. We're calling the City Council of the City of El Centro meeting for March 19th, 2019 to order. If we could have the roll call by the city clerk.
Councilmember Oliva.
Present.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem
Present.
Silva, and Mayor Garcia.
Present. We could have the Pledge of Allegiance by Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Please join me in saluting our flag and our country. Ready to begin.
If you could please remain standing for our invocation by Councilmember Tomas Oliva.
Please join me in bowing your heads. Lord, thank you very much for your many blessings. Thank you for allowing us to be gathered here today. Please give us your wisdom so that we may do your work for the people and the residents of El Centro. Lastly, I would just like to ask that you bless the families who have lost loved ones, specifically our friend in Brawley, who was taken from us too soon. And I ask and pray for his friends and family to find comfort in this tough time. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
We could have our city attorney's report on closed session.
There are no reportable actions this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now we get to move on to something that's very special for our city. If we could have Mr. Banks come up. Good evening, sir. Now I have a proclamation here from the City of El Centro for your exemplary service. We are going to christen March 29th, 2019 as Roland Dwayne Banks Day. Whereas Roland Dwayne Banks has announced his retirement from the City of El Centro Public Library effective March 29th, 2019 after 17 years of outstanding service. And whereas on January 29th, 2002, Roland Dwayne Banks began his library career with the City of El Centro as Librarian 2 and promoted to Library Director on April 19th, 2006, and carried out his duties in a manner which was a credit to his community, family, and profession. And whereas Roland Dwayne Banks served the citizens of El Centro with professionalism, integrity, and uncompromising excellence. And whereas the El Centro City Council wish to express their appreciation for his dedication and commitment to the City of El Centro and to honor Roland Dwayne Banks on his retirement. Now therefore, I, Edgar Garcia, Mayor of the City of El Centro, State of California, do hereby proclaim March 29th, 2019 as Roland Dwayne Banks Day in the City of El Centro. Now, sir, after such a long time serving the city in something that I know that you're absolutely passionate about, I know that you must have some comments.
Well, I have enjoyed working for the city. It wasn't something that I had planned on doing. I planned on working maybe for 5 years and then go back to retiring. I had retired from the school system after 30 years. But it was an opportunity, and it's been a blessing for me to be able to work for the City of El Centro. We've had some ups and downs with the library. I've had an outstanding staff that has worked with me and has been exemplary in what we've been able to do. Haven't accomplished everything that we wanted to do, but we've accomplished a lot. And wish that I could stay and put that new library together, but I'm willing to come back on a consultant basis and help with that if you want me to. Again, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to work for the city of El Centro.
Comments from council?
Mr. Banks, there's no words that I can put to fully encompass the community's gratitude for the time that you have given to the community. And as I think back on the 17 years, and as you may have touched on it, the fact that you were there to put to working when the library was in downtown, and the transition of what must have happened during the earthquake, moving it, modernizing it, creating new programs for our children. And so throughout the years, I'm sure you have touched many lives. And there are many children that have probably improved in their literacy, adults that have improved their literacy. You've probably sparked interest in education, art, right, and English and literature. And so as I take a moment to just pause of all the years that you put in for our library, I really want to say thank you. And how much that can carry over and speak for the people of this community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Banks, it's been a tremendous, you've been a tremendous asset for the city of El Centro, and I first met you as my librarian at Wilson Junior High School. So, our paths have crossed a couple times, but I don't know anybody that has a greater passion for the children in our library system or in any library system in this county as you do. Many times I've come to the library and seen you reading to the children and just completely capturing their attention, which as a new parent, I understand that that's a little difficult sometimes. But I never saw those kids not 100% engaged with you when you were doing your readings. So it says something for you, your ability, your passion, and we're going to greatly miss that here in the El Centro Library. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Banks, I've been on the El Centro City Council now for, I think it's going on 12 years, but in reflecting back how long I've known you, I think it's a lot more than that, and I think it's closer to 25 years in my early political aspirations. You and Rose were there with me as one of the early supporters of my efforts, and I know that Rose has been the backbone of your effort and work, and you probably would not be if it wasn't for your family and your children and Rose as well. And I think that when it comes time to retire, we often reflect back on our contributions, and I think that in us reflecting and you reflecting back on what you have done for our community and the thousands of children and families that you have provided assistance for over the years, it should bring a smile to your face, because it brings a smile to my face. So now it's time to enjoy retirement and have a great, great retirement, and thank you for all the work that you have done for our community.
Thank you.
So I'm going to try to get through this. Mr. Banks, I've known you for a long time, and as my fellow council members have so eloquently stated, you've touched thousands upon thousands of lives. And I truly believe that if you instill in people, especially children, a love of reading, you have impacted their lives for their entire lives, right? And have put them on that path for success. When I think back to what libraries were 17 years ago, it's just incredible to me the changes that you have seen over your career with us. The transition from a very traditional library to a library that now has fully stocked with computers, all of the new programs that you put in, the zip books, if anyone's ever had a chance to do that, where you order a book and you add it to the collection, all of the homework assistance, and just making the library a very welcoming community space. So again, you've just touched so many lives as we transition away from a traditional focus of the library to much more of a community focus. I can't say enough about your helpmate, Rose, and everything that she has done with regard to her programs and the Friends of the Library. If anyone wants to find a good deal on a book, be sure you check out the books that Rose has. Phenomenal collection. When we talk about not only the transition that has occurred, but the transition that is to come, and we know that you were instrumental in the strategies being developed for the new library. So we welcome and encourage you to stay connected, stay involved as we deliver to the citizens and residents of El Centro and this entire community a library that is going to be state-of-the-art and a place where families will continue to connect and grow together with their love of reading. So, Mr. Banks, you have just our heartfelt thanks for all you have done to enrich our community. You and Rose, thank you so much.
Mr. Banks, I just have to echo my colleagues' statements. You know, as a child, my earliest memories are being in a library and how it affected me and inspired my love of reading. And it really just, it's a spark that really pushes children towards education. And I know that you've affected many, many children in this community throughout your tenure. And I just want to thank you. And your legacy is left in the children that you've touched over here. And having a love of reading is something that you never lose. So I want to thank you, and you deserve all of the accolades that you're receiving.
May
Now,
I say one thing about reading?
Please.
Of course.
Next Thursday, the 28th, we're having our family night at the library in recognition of March being Read Across America Month, and so we're going to be reading books as families and invite you all to come and join us.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Still pushing the library.
Love it. I love it.
Now, if we could come down to take some photos with you, sir?
My turn. Thank you.
Our turn after.
I'm done.
Now here comes the other paparazzi. All right.
Moving on, we have a recognition for the American Medical Response. Do we have a representative?
Oh, right.
Honorable Mayor and council members. I would like to introduce Mr. Mike Rice with American Medical Response. He is in charge of operations for San Diego County and Imperial County. A lot has happened in a very short period of time. As you're all aware, we've seen the county transition ambulance providers. American Medical Response stepped in and filled a role, a significant role in a very short period of time. And so my hat's off to their entire staff who have been awesome to work with. I'm already impressed by the level of professionalism displayed. Really what I want to do though is recognize the employees of AMR and specifically those employees that previously worked for Gold Cross Ambulance. If you can imagine being on the job full-time, you're supporting yourself and your family and not knowing if your next paycheck is coming. The weeks and months leading up to this, some very interesting things, to say the least, were happening with the previous provider, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Employees were not even sure that they were going to receive their next paycheck. But despite that, they stayed on the job because they recognized that number one, their obligation was to the community that they served. I just, for all those that are in attendance, again, just heartfelt gratitude. I know that it was a big deal for you guys to step up and that was a huge sacrifice. So that's really why we're here today. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mike Rice. I'm the Director of Operations for San Diego and now also Imperial County. And I wanted to echo what the chief just said. There was a lot of change and there was a lot of uncertainty. Those things are all cause a lot of stress in a job that's already very stressful. But our employees came to work every day and took great care of their community, which is what they're committed to doing. And they did it in a way, I was just very impressed, the level of professionalism and grace in which they got through these challenges. And so I'm glad a lot of them got to come today. I would like to ask for a round of applause for our employees if I could. I'd also like to thank Chief Herbert for his support. Without him, this could have been a lot more difficult than it was. And quite frankly, it was a lot easier than we expected it to be. And it was largely in part to the fire chief's support. So I think it's important to make sure that you all know that he was instrumental in our success here. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank the El Centro Firefighters Association, Local 3788, for welcoming us into their fire station so graciously. It really made that transition a lot smoother. It made our employees feel a lot better and helped to relieve that stress. So a big thank you to them. And then finally, thank you to all of you. I know that your support was instrumental in our ability to accomplish what we did. So thank you to each and every one of you. We're happy to be here, and we're looking forward to a very long relationship with the City of El Centro. Thank you.
Good.
Wonderful. Any comments?
Sure, very short. I can imagine the transition was very difficult, but to both yourself, to your company, to the workers, thank you for being mindful of the public health, the public safety, because ultimately that's what it's all about. And so I thank you for sticking in with this company and sticking in, and I'm glad that it's working out.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, because there's so many of the employees here, I think it's important to say to them, thank you for your service, because it could have been very easy just to walk off the job and find employment elsewhere and really leave our community without that service that's so needed by so many. So thank you to you guys. Thank you for coming in and filling this void, and hopefully we look forward to a long-term relationship too. And speaking to the chief, he's very happy with having you guys cohabitating with our guys in our stations, and I think that's going to be a a very big positive for the residents of El Centro. So thank you.
Thanks.
Likewise, I just want to, on behalf of every resident of El Centro, thank you so much for the quick transition of services and all the employees. I recognize at least one person out there. Thank you guys for what you do for our community, and you know, we expect great things from you. It sounds like we're off to a good start, and just keep that up. And however we can help you, on behalf of the council, on behalf of the city, please, you have a great liaison with our chief here, and just thank you so much.
So I want to first start with a huge thank you to the chief and his team. We know we've been tracking as part of the Community Enhancement Task Force just the overall relationship with regard to response times and everything else. And I think that we're moving in a very positive direction. The co-location, we've tried it out before, and it just makes a lot of sense. And especially with the limited resources that the city of El Centro has, the fact that we can co-locate is just phenomenal. To the employees, knowing that there is some uncertainty, not knowing for sure, and kind of wondering paycheck to paycheck what's going to happen with your company. The fact that you would put the interests of the city of El Centro and its residents as a priority, you have our eternal gratitude for that. So we also share your commitment to a long and successful relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying thank you, Chief. You were instrumental in taking the public safety initiative and making sure that our residents were taken care of. And thank you so much for filling the void. Thank you so much for the employees that stepped up and under these trying times, because it ultimately did amount to chaos. We were looking at how we were going to deal with this, and it was such a evolving situation, and a lot of people were working diligently to make sure that we kept these crucial emergency services for our constituents. And ultimately, you guys, hats off. You pulled it off. It was amazing, and I'd like to thank you for all of your work, and we expect that we'll have a very good relationship going forward for a long time, because if you have that level of commitment when there's basically all of this turmoil, now we can go forward. But ultimately, public safety was the number one issue, and Chief, you were on top of it, and I'd like to commend you for that. So we have a certificate of appreciation for your commitment to providing continuing emergency services to the community.
Great.
And we should take a photo.
That'd be great.
With the employees.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this one may move far.
Okay, all I can say is it's much better to see you here than at my front door at like 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
Was mine not on? Really?
Mr. Michael?
Technical difficulties. It was on, but she said it was just turned down. One more presentation. This will be empty.
So Cheryl,
Yes.
I'm kicking number 3 to you.
All righty, I'm good, okay.
So for item number 3, the presentation of the League of California Cities Women's Caucus, I'm going to go ahead and defer to our representative.
Okay, so, I don't know how to start this off. I have the honor of being the president of the League of California Cities Women's Caucus. So that's a statewide organization, and we are really committed and dedicated to seeing more women become part of our governance structure in public life, as well as appointments to public boards and commissions, because we just really feel that that diversity is important, and that diversity leads to really good decision-making, because you're kind of opening up the voices that are being heard. So in that role as president of the Women's Caucus, it's my great honor to recognize locally, as we're doing throughout the state, every member of the Women's Caucus is recognizing a woman of persistence. And this is an individual, this is a woman within our community that is being recognized for their selfless dedication to their community and the things that they do that shows their tireless commitment to making their community a better place. And so we're given the opportunity as board members to nominate and recognize a woman of persistence. And it's my great joy to recognize Jessica from Spread the Love Charity as our Imperial County Woman of Persistence. So on behalf of the League of California Cities Women's Caucus, we'd like to recognize Jessica Solorio as the 2019 Woman of Persistence honoree. And whereas the month of March is designated as Women's History Month and tribute is paid to women across the nation, recognizing them for their immeasurable contributions, and whereas women play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in our lives, representing every race, class, and ethnic background, and having made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our communities. And whereas the League of California Cities Women's Caucus wishes to recognize and acknowledge women in the great state of California for their confident and continued persistence in leadership, thinking outside oneself while encouraging others, and overcoming obstacles encountered along the way. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the League of California Cities Women's Caucus honors Jessica Solorio for the contributions she has given to her community, her willingness to empower others, and her commitment to making a difference. We honor you as a woman of persistence and commend her for all she does. Dated this 19th day of March 2019, League of California Cities Women's Caucus, Cheryl Villegas Walker, President.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super flattered. I mean, you either love my persistence or you don't. And I thank you guys for always answering your guys' phones for sure. So I know I'm not too persistent. But I think we were all here we're all here in this community basically to help each other. And so the homeless population is one that is often forgotten or looked upon badly. And so I am their voice, and that's all I'm here to do.
Jessica, I really want to say congratulations for this honor,
Thank
for
you.
this recognition. I have worked with you in times throughout the years as far as helping out the homeless population, and I know that constituents who have come to my day office, I've taken to you, and you've helped out, and you're right. Our homeless population is a very forgotten, disadvantaged, maybe looked over population here, and many of them struggle with a lot of things. And so I know that you're able to provide a place, meals, a place where they can feel comfortable and safe, right? And you have that tough love for them. Some of them just need
Very much
a
so.
very figurative or literal slap in the face to say, wake up, because what you're doing is just creating the cycle of habit that's keeping you where you're at, and you need to step out of it, right? And I know that you have persisted in carrying on that mission, and so I just want to say thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, Jessica. I think we all have assisted or helped you in some way over the last few years. I think you have connected with a group of individuals that are very difficult to connect with, and that comes with persistence and just being trusted. And I think a lot of these people not only have given up on themselves, but they've given up on society. And so to have somebody like you as an advocate that goes out there day after day, and they see you every day out there talking to them, and they gain your trust, or you gain their trust, and they're able to relate. And some of those people we've been successful in helping relocate back with their families and get them back on their feet, which maybe never would have happened without your efforts. So thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you for continuing to be their voice, and thank you for helping with our homeless population in El
Thank you
Centro.
for all your help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's a wonderful recognition that you've been given, but I can't think of a better person, Jessica, because what I know of you, persistence is a word that really, really defines you. Because you do, I mean, the work and the comments by my colleagues are right on point, but you're not a popular person everywhere. And so the challenges of that and balancing, you know, the issue of homelessness, because we get the calls and you get the calls, and being that advocate and finding ways to provide more of a permanent resolution to this, I think that's what makes you special. So I think I echo my colleagues' comments and congratulating you on what I think is a very well-deserved recognition.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Jessica.
Thank you, Edgar.
You've worked diligently, and you've become essentially a benchmark in the community for what you do. So continue on with your work, and we'll continue to support you. I know we've worked together on several things throughout the years, and we're always there, and
Yeah.
just keep it up. I can't think of anybody more deserving for this award.
Thank you.
So congratulations.
Thank you. Photos? Okay.
I need a picture because this is actually going to be on the League of California Cities website, so, yeah.
I have my board here too. Can we include them?
All right, board members, come on up. Scrunch.
know what we forgot to do? We forgot to add that item. It's still
Okay, that's all the stuff we're gonna get tonight.
Reference item, the letter. Let's do it now. You want to do it? You want me to? Jenna, we
6,000
forgot
to go.
to
I'm not gonna hit today.
add it when we get there. You're saying that. Add it now. Okay, we'll add it when we get there. Yeah. Thank you, don't forget. Okay.
So I was castigated by my mayor pro tem because I always forget to read the notice to the public, and he reminded me. However, I don't think it applied to the presentations, but this is a public meeting. If there is an item on the agenda on which you wish to be heard, you're asked to complete a blue speaker slip and submit it to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. Persons wishing to address the council are not required to identify themselves pursuant to Government Code Section 54953.3. However, this information assists the mayor by ensuring that all persons wishing to address the council are recognized, and also assists the city clerk in preparing the city council meeting minutes. When the item is announced and your name is called by the mayor, please step to the podium and state your name for the record. Unless the mayor extends the time, there is a 3-minute time limit for each public presentation. If you wish to address the council concerning any other matter not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment portion of the agenda. And now we're moving on to scheduled public comments. And we have the El Centro Chamber of Commerce monthly report. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, Mayor Garcia and fellow council members. We missed you yesterday, by the way.
Yes.
On behalf of the
Blame one of
El...
the judges.
Oh, okay. On behalf of the El Centro Chamber, I'd like to share a couple of upcoming events with you. Tomorrow, we'll have our Board of Directors mixer. We changed it to Wednesday, so it's from 5 to 7. The Chamber will be participating in the upcoming Ivy Ag Expo this coming Friday. Tuesday, April 9th, GOAC, Governmental Affairs Chamber Training, a chamber training to be effective advocates for the local, state, and federal levels. The Chamber would like to thank the City of El Centro for their participation in upcoming Spring Mega Mixer, the Community Center, on Thursday, April 18th from 5 to 7. Lastly, we, in accordance with SB 1343, we are hosting a sexual harassment training prevention seminar on Tuesday, April 30th from 9 to 11 at the Strike Zone. Anyone interested can call the chamber. Okay?
Terry, the mixer tomorrow is where?
Excuse me?
The mixer tomorrow, you said there's a mixer tomorrow? Is
There's
that
a
the
mixer
chamber
tomorrow
office?
at the chamber.
Okay.
Yes, we changed it due to Sir Optimus.
Okay.
So, hope to see you.
Terry,
and
do
hope-
you know what the cost is for the sexual harassment training?
I believe it's $30 you need, for non-chamber
The
members.
chamber members,
Yeah.
it's how much, do you know?
About 35, I think we just upped it $5. Okay? So we hope, call the chamber and set it up with Anthony. I know we're filling up already.
Okay.
Thank you.
Terry.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So now we have the consent agenda. Do we have any council members wishing to pull an item? Not hearing that, then we take it up for a vote. We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Silva, second by Councilmember Jackson.
His screen's off.
And we're having technical difficulties.
I'm not ignoring it, I promise.
Was it off earlier?
No, I just did it right now.
the fixtures on her.
No.
No.
She's gone to fix it. Can we let him use this one? Okay.
It just happened right now as it switched. Oh. What'd you do? I didn't touch it, maybe that was the problem. Can I just enter an I?
If you would like to do a voice,
Can we move forward?
We can.
voice until we get it up and going,
Let's do that.
we can move on, and we'll try to fix it in the meantime.
So we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Silva, second by Councilmember Jackson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nobody opposes. The consent agenda passes 5-0.
Mine was off. I turned the phone off.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 16, public hearing for the purpose of considering approving mitigated negative declaration 18-01 for 1204 Poplar Drive, presentation by our Director of Community Development, Norma Villacaña.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. The project before you is a request from El Centro Regional Medical Center to rezone a property at 1204 Poplar Avenue. Just to give you a brief background of the project, this project was presented to the Planning Commission back in November of 2018. There was several members of the community who spoke during the public hearing session, and testimony was received and heard by the planning commissioners. Basically, testimony received were from nearby property owners who were in opposition of the project, approving the project. We've also received a couple of additional written comment letters or emails that I believe you have a copy of. We've received 2 today regarding in opposition of the project, and also requesting that the hearing be continued in order to allow members of the community to attend, make plans and attend the meeting. Planning Commission did not take any action on this project. No motion was made by the Planning Commission. So at this time, the ECRMC is appealing before the City Council the non-action of the Planning Commission. The project description, as you may be familiar with, is located at the corner of Poplar and Cypress Drive. It's the corner house. It's a single-family residential unit. And the intent or the project proposes to rezone the property from single-family residential to limited use, which would be public use for the hospital. At this time, there's no construction being proposed by the hospital. What the hospital has intended to do with this property is convert it into office space. Project location, again, it's 1204 Poplar Avenue, Poplar Drive. The parcel is approximately 10,800 square feet. It's single-family residential. These are just a couple of site photographs. The first one is the project site. That's the 1204 Poplar home. And the next one is just the surrounding residential area. This is a photo of Cypress between Ross and Poplar. And one of the reasons we want to convey this photo is because at the Planning Commission meeting, several of the comments that were in opposition of the project was because of the traffic along Cypress Avenue. And then the project abuts the alley that basically takes you to the medical office building next to the hospital. Again, this is the alleyway leading to ECRMC and the alleyway abutting the project site 1204 Poplar. In regards to the general plan amendment, basically, as you can see on the first, the existing is single-family residential. If the project is approved, it would be converted to LU, which is the green, the proposed. And same thing with the change of zone. Right now, single-family residential, and the project would change to LU. A mitigated negative declaration was completed for the project, and some of the issues, some of the analysis that were completed were in regards to aesthetics, land use, and planning. As you can see, the conclusion was that with mitigation, the project impacts would be less than significant. Now, at the Planning Commission meeting, some of the comments received were the following. There were concerns regarding vehicles speeding through the street and off-street and illegal parking of vehicles. Again, a lot of the comments were in regards to Cypress Drive. Another comment received that the project does not consider the overall impact of ECRMC expansion onto Poplar Drive. Once rezoned, it was felt that ECRMC could demolish the house like it was done previously with 3 other properties abutting the hospital. Also, the public testimony also basically concluded, expressed concerns about the residential areas being destroyed by the encroachment of all the ECRMC facilities. The change of zone, it was felt that it was unnecessary because there were, according to the testimony, there was plenty of vacant office space along Imperial Avenue. And lastly, the existing traffic in the area basically generated by the hospital impacts the residents. So there was no approval at the Planning Commission. Now, after reviewing the project and maybe going back through the project, staff has a few recommendations that the council may consider for the project. One of them is basically to prohibit on-street parking at 1204 Poplar Drive for ECRMC employees. So basically, the parking of the employees would have to be either at a hospital parking lot or within the driveway. There's a driveway at the project site, and it could accommodate up to 3 cars, I believe. And then in reference to the comments received at the Planning Commission meeting, staff, we explored different options. And one of the options that staff concluded was there may be a need to do some kind of traffic calming along Cypress Avenue. And that's something that we could further explore to limit the high-speed traffic that the residents are complaining about. Another option would be to expand the permit-only on-street parking area to include the area that's highlighted on the map. Right now, permit-only parking is on Poplar Drive and Pepper Drive. So if we were to expand along Cypress, Ross Avenue, even to the north, Sandalwood, and 12th and 14th Street, that might alleviate some of the concerns of the residents. Other options would be to require ECRMC to increase their parking enforcement for off-street parking requirements. In other words, have constant enforcement to ensure that employees are not parking on residential streets. Also, there is a gate at the cul-de-sac on Poplar Drive that residents complain that there's a lot of pedestrian activity coming in and out of that gate. So residents are complaining that that gate is being used as an informal drop-off area for employees, and that's where employees come in and out. And another option would be to review and consider revisions of parking standards for hospitals. And also, one final option, that alternative that we are recommending is maybe require ECRMC to shuttle employees to the hospital from an off-site parking area. Again, these are just recommendations in trying to address the residents' concerns that we heard at the Planning Commission meeting. In regards to the mitigated negative declaration, it was circulated for 31 days. The residents did get notice of the public hearing and also of the public review period. So the public hearing has been scheduled for today. These are the options that we are including in our project. Basically, option A would be to approve the change of zone, the mitigated negative declaration, and the general plan amendment as requested. Option B would be to deny the project or deny the change of zone. Or option C would be to continue the public hearing. And this concludes my presentation. I understand Dr. Edward has a PowerPoint that he would also like to.
Before I do that, Mr. Mayor, can I
Yeah.
ask a
Norma?
question? Can I ask a question? Norma, is there something you can show me, when you reference some people complaining about a pedestrian gate, that where is that at?
Let me see if I can. How do you do that? If you, how do you do that?
Yeah, right there.
If you see at the end, the west end of Poplar, the cul-de-sac, right at the cul-de-sac, there is a gate. Okay.
Okay, I think I've got it. Yeah, there it is.
Thank you.
Get it right?
Right here, like in this area, basically. There is a gate where the residents complain that, I guess, employees are dropped off and they enter the gate.
Oh,
to-
okay, so they drive all the way down.
To Poplar, they drop
Poplar,
off somebody.
Drop off, they
and
can
then
walk, and then they can access the back,
Right.
essentially the east side of the hospital, right?
and-
But I'm just asking for clarification as to that point.
Yes,
Makes
those
sense.
are the complaints that.
Okay.
we-
A few more just questions for me right now, Norma. So we currently have parking permit requirements along Poplar, right?
Poplar and Pepper Drive.
Okay. And you're recommending that perhaps we expand that
Yes.
residential permit only?
Because we've also received complaints from residents along Sandalwood and Ross. Actually, they're going through the process, working with engineering department to maybe get parking permits. So we're recommending maybe expanding the area for permit only, as noted in the highlighted map.
Okay, and how effective is that? I don't know if you or Abraham can tell me, are the restrictions within the streets that we have residential parking only, are those effective in terms of keeping other people out, or?
Basically, what happens is every year at the beginning of the year, each property owner gets at minimum 4 permits.
Okay.
And those permits are used for family members or visitors, and they can also request for additional permits if they need additional permits. But those are only issued for the residential properties along.
And Chief, do we have enforcement, or do we have enforcement where people that are not permitted to park there, in fact, they're fined, or there's some consequences for parking there unauthorized?
Yeah, so we have received complaints in the past. There is parking restrictions there, and we do enforce that on a regular basis.
Okay. Good, Chief. Norma, so you showed us a picture of some vehicles that I guess were parked on Cypress. Keep going.
Oh. Well, the letter that was submitted by Mr. McLean basically has,
Right there, right there.
yeah, right there.
So, is there any evidence that those vehicles there are in fact tied to or related to the hospital operation?
There's no evidence.
Okay. That's it. That's all I have for right now.
Mr. Mayor, so I wanted to kind of pick up from where Mr. Silva was going from that, because I think it's really important for us to be making data-driven decisions. So have we done any trip counters on Cypress or Ross? Is there any way for us to determine how much of that traffic is actually due to the hospital versus folks going to Wilson Junior High or the high school, or just trying to avoid the nightmare that Mr. Campos has created on La Brucherie, any of those things?
Yeah, we have not done any studies, but I suspect that a lot of that traffic is not hospital traffic, is basically people trying to take a shortcut from the south end to the high school, or because it's a direct shot to the high school, Wilson Junior High, and in order to avoid Imperial Avenue too.
Because I know a lot of what we do with regard to transportation planning has to do with determining where those actual trips are taking people from start point to stop point and the purpose of the trip and everything else. And so for us to come up with effective solutions, we need to have an understanding
Right.
as to, you know, what that data really shows. So are there ways for us to do some kind of modeling to determine that? Because anecdotal evidence gets us so far, but we really have to have an understanding of what that is.
Good evening, I'm Mayor and council members. So what can be done is place counters to just get a general sense of the traffic, daily traffic. It is quite difficult to establish a point source and destination study. Those tend to be more in survey related, where you try to survey the folks that are going and ask them where they're coming and where they're going, where their
Right.
ultimate destination
Right.
is. But there are ways to do just counts on traffic, and that's pretty standard.
Okay. I think that that's really important. I think that the other thing that we need to be mindful of is a lot of this, I think, has to do with the cumulative impacts with what's happened at the hospital campus, right? I mean, changes that have taken place previously with the new opening of the MOB, and you know, this is really just a preview of coming attractions as to other things that are going to be happening at El Centro Regional. So I think that we, the hospital, as representatives on the Board of Trustees, we cannot over-communicate with everyone, including the residents, as to what the plan is for the scope of the projects we're planning there. But I really think that, to Mr. Campos's point and Ms. Villacana, we really do need to have a better understanding of what the actual counts are that are in that area. I also, in terms of your identification of particular streets where we start requiring permitted parking, let's make sure that we're being comprehensive in our approach. I mean, we started with Pepper, and then we moved to Poplar, and now we're proposing 3 additional streets. Is that just going to force the traffic pattern out into, or the parking out into other areas? So should we be looking at a holistic approach to the permit process? And I know that the hospital has looked at other options, perhaps even going back to, seemed to me when we were able to use the Latter-day Saint Church parking, that really helped us a lot with regard to our employees. If that's an option for us still, that would be great. If it's not, then we need to look for other alternatives. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McBride, I just add something. Norma, on the, looking at this picture with all the cars parked there, that's along Cypress, right? It does look a bit unusual to have that many vehicles parked there. Maybe Dr. Edwards can address if he thinks these are hospital related vehicles? Because it's kind of far to walk from here to the hospital unless they're, and are there other options that these, assuming that they're related to hospital employees or hospital operations, are there alternatives that can be investigated to try to mitigate this? So.
Mr. Mayor. Norman, one of the comments that was made earlier was the potential or the possibility of adding additional parking spaces at the 1204 property. Was that, I didn't see that as a recommendation.
It's not in the PowerPoint, but that's another discussion staff has had. If the backyard of the home at 1204 is converted into a parking space, it would accommodate 6 or 7 additional vehicles.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
I think we're ready for the presentation.
Oh, I had a,
Oh, you have a comment?
yeah, I just have one quick question. And forgive me if this sounds strange, but in one of your recommendations, you place that it be that no ECRMC employee park at 1204 Poplar.
On
Correct?
street, on the
On
street.
street, on
Yeah,
the
they
street,
could
right?
park on the driveway, which can accommodate 3 cars. The driveway can.
Right, okay, it could do 3. And I would assume that, and I believe I've heard some comments as far as property owners surrounding that property are complaining that ECRMC employees are parking on their property.
On the street.
On the street,
On the street,
right,
yeah.
not on the driveway. Crazy idea. Have you ever heard or have you ever seen an example somewhere else where we're saying ECRMC employees can only park in front of that house? Like if they're tied to ECRMC, that it's an ECRMC property, and it be where they cannot park anywhere else but in front of that house? Would that violate some
No, but
environmental or some planning
being
principle?
a residential area, the idea is if you're converting a property from residential to commercial, the idea under our commercial development standards, off-street parking is not allowed. I know it happens, but that's why commercial establishments have to accommodate the required parking spaces within their property, not counting the street parking. So we're treating this project as a commercial project.
So I'm sorry, so that means that whatever project, if this is approved, whatever project gets developed on that site, the project will have to have sufficient off-street parking for whatever usage is
That's
proposed
correct.
within the property.
And I believe from talking to Mrs. Kennerson, I think you said it was 4 or 5 employees at that site. So, right now there's enough for 3, maybe 4 parking on the driveway because it's a wide driveway. So it may be able to accommodate the employees who are working there, but not on the street. That's one of our recommendations.
So I thought what Mr. Oliva was asking, but it wasn't, but I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So this property, once it's reclassified, if it's reclassified or rezoned, the property won't qualify for resident parking, correct?
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other comments?
It's safe.
If you're ready.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Let me see if I can advance to my slides. While I'm advancing to my slides, I actually changed my comments for the openings. I love we are always here in this community to help each other. Jessica, I'm going to be quoting you from here on out. Thank you.
I think we have to close out of this presentation. Is his separate?
Yeah, it's a separate slide.
Yeah, so we need to close out of this
I
slide
don't know
deck.
who's got control of this. Awesome, thank you so much. I'll try to make it quick. I know that, I want to start with the parking plan so everybody really appreciates that the forefathers that developed the hospital, one of the things they forgot to look at is the landlock that we're in and the parking needs. Things change from the early 50s, 60s, or 70s to now, and the number of cars that are being used. But I want to remind everybody that I actually asked the staff to remind the staff daily that parking on the hospital property is for patients and their families first. So we want to respect that. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that when you show up, there is parking available for you and your families. It's not that we're pushing the staff off, but we're actually asking them to leave space for the families and their loved ones. We've had in excess of 105 and 107 patients actually being patients in our hospital, and the families come with not just one car, with multiple cars. So I want to start with that because I want to give you a sense of reality that the hospital is actually increasing in volumes, and that's may not be a good thing for the patients there, but we're here to serve the community. And I'm going to address some of the things that you've heard. Taking a look at the total required parking for staff plus patients, what you net at the end of the day, both the medical office building and the hospital with ancillary building, is close to 464. So let's count the provided parking on campus is in excess of 556. That includes the temporary parking that we built when we demolished the homes, the medical office building site itself, and the hospital site, when you add all that. So we have actually developed a parking that is beyond what is required. I also want to share with you that when you take a look at all of this, our 92 parking slots are in compliant with city regulations. So that's something that we want to make sure that you all understand. We're not trying to go away from the city regulations. To answer your question, Councilman Member Olivia, is that when the two homes that we currently have, we don't have any parking passes anymore that we have on Popular. Those were all retrieved from us by the city a couple of years ago when we changed the usage of those to staff offices. And the reason why we're displacing so much staff is because we're actually replacing the places of where the staff used to be with clinical services to be provided here for the city, so you don't have a need to go to San Diego or anywhere else. So the expansion is happening so that we can increase services. I wish that I didn't have to displace any of the staff. Everybody wants to be inside the hospital, but I really cannot accommodate all of them. The gate that's between the two houses that are left and the rest of the hospital is actually so that the IT folks that are in one of the houses and all other facilities folks in the second house can go back and forth to service the need of physicians and the need for staff when we have ITs down, when we don't. And you know that we have old IT infrastructures that we're replacing, but we need that gate, not because people are just dropped off there, but because there's actual service that goes back and forth, which is staff from IT and facilities going in to service a need of the hospital and or a need that we have either in patient rooms or in offices. So it's very key and critical. I want to kind of be honest in the assessment is that I can't really control who parks in public streets. I want to also share with you that on a daily basis, I see people speeding through the parking lot, and I was very thankful that the chief had somebody close by that the police actually went after them in the parking lot and ticketed them. That was the happiest moment. So I want to thank the chief of police for having presence. They're there, and I know that they're monitoring what's happening in that area. You know, I've asked some of the homeowners if they're kind enough to sell the homes. That didn't go too far. We inform the staff constantly that if they're towed there, if they're parked there illegally, they're going to be towed. So only with permitted parking they're allowed to actually have permit. If not, we do tow them. We've had several staff members that have been towed. We also have a temporary staff member who came from Acme who was actually relieved from his or her duties because they kept parking in the same spot where they needed to have a sticker, and they didn't, so we did not allow them to continue. So we are enforcing the fact that you can't just do whatever you want to. My new office actually overlooks Popular, so either me or Lucy are constantly on the lookout for what's happening. I'm never going to stop everybody from acting silly. There are some people that speed through, but they're not necessarily staff from the hospital. I can't really account for everybody that speeds. If they have scrubs on, unfortunately, a lot of our neighbors believe that they're coming to the hospital. But I want to remind you, there are 7 different office buildings outside of the control of the hospital with very limited parking around them. And again, I can have Kathy give you the addresses and the names of all this. A lot of them park somewhere around the hospital. They're all wearing scrubs, but they're not necessarily our employees. I can't enforce anything on those folks. And I have seen several that actually park somewhere and go across the hospital to get to an office building that does not belong to us, and they're not really our employees. We have been exploring options for employee parking to include transferring employees back and forth. As a matter of fact, thank you, Councilmember Walker. The church has really opted out from helping us. The church that you were referring to. We've talked to them several times. I've actually communicated with Utah to try to see if they're able to help us. There was no return phone call, and there was no approvals to go back to that spot that we had. As a matter of fact, there is an area that is owned by one of our folks that helped us design the medical office building, which is adjacent to that whole lot. Sandy area. Again, I'm sorry if I don't know the specifics. We've asked if we can use that. We were told no. We went to beside the church. We asked if the church is willing to help sell us the property that they own. There's another property right across between Ross and Imperial, right there, kind of catty corner from where the marketplace is. We've talked to the owner of that property, who's one of our physicians, and we have not heard back if he's willing to allow us to park there. We've gone as far actually as parking locations on Imperial all the way down to where the current library is at. I know that we've been talking about that property as well on the board to try to see if there's a way that we can move, but I don't think that there is. Another thing that I just want to make sure that I share with everybody, everybody's asking me, why can't you just use the bond money to build parking? An average parking spot in a structure is about $20,000. To build a structure is $4.9 million. When we actually sold our bonds, the bond owners did not allow us as part of the projects to build parking. It wasn't approved. The only thing they could approve is anything that has to do with healthcare delivery. There is a reason for that, and that is hospitals are not in the parking business. So I hate to share this with everybody, but I don't want people to think that I can just write checks out of bond money. Plus, everything has to be approved by the board. The board, which I know there's 2 city councilmen that are on my board, they cannot change how that money is designated because it comes to us through the board from the bondholder as designated for other than parking. Again, I wish that the forefathers could have thought about parking, but they didn't. So, we purchased this property back in February of 2015. The property is adjacent to the medical office building. It's only a block away from it. It really helps us that we are able to put some staff there. You know where it's at because you've seen it in multiple pictures. Again, if you don't know the property location, we can give you some more pictures, but this is a quick snapshot of it. What we're asking for has already been addressed. I don't want to actually go down this because the city leadership, the city manager's office knows exactly what we're asking for. The current zoning from R1, proposed zoning for limited use. Current use is low density residential to public use. We're very limited on space because of the seismic compliance that state mandate. Again, we're building what we're building in the hospital because we're trying to actually get to answer the seismic compliance issue that's been an issue for quite some time. We were under the gun. We had a Senate Bill 306, that demanded that the hospital be seismically compliant. So the things that we're doing is not to annoy the neighbors, but to actually comply with a Senate bill and a Senate mandate. And you see what we're requesting. There's 5 staff members. I really am requesting that we are able to park 4 cars in the driveway. The office hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Again, foot travel to and from the hospital is going to be through the alleyway or the medical office building, because the team that we're going to go there is really our marketing team. So they'll be going back and forth through the alleyway and not through the other street. There is no construction that's going to be anticipated for the actual house itself. No additional structure is going to be added. No patients are going to be going to the home. This is not where we do any clinical work at all. We will continue to actually maintain, our own staff is going to maintain the landscape, and they actually do a phenomenal job maintaining the landscape. We will upkeep the home, and we promise to be a good neighbor. What we're requesting really is the approval for the general plan and amendment to the change of zone. Again, I want to just add a couple of things. One is enforcement is there. I want to thank the chief of police for helping us with enforcement, because they're always there. We're looking at options. I haven't given up on actually an off-site location. There's a property you might know of that's right next to Buckland Park. We went there to talk to the folks that own it in hopes that we can actually demolish the house that's on it. I know it's been an eyesore for some to try to build more parking to shuttle employees back and forth. It's not that simplistic, so we ran into some issues there, so we're looking at some other properties. I'm open for any questions that you may have for me.
Yes. Dr. Edwards, can I talk to you about that gate that it was referenced and you also referenced, and so it appears that the residents are saying that that's being used for access for employees. You're saying that the gate is being used by IT
And
staff.
facilities, yes.
So is it reasonable to also think that is being used by non-IT folks that are using that gate as an access way to the facility?
It could be possibly used by folks that actually work across the street from the hospital. I have no control who comes down that street, frankly. And I can't really shut the gate down, because then you're isolating IT and facilities from the rest of the campus. And now I have a problem with where are these staff members, how are they going to get access to the actual facility?
Couldn't we install a coded lock that's only available for IT and the general services employees? Because I think that what I'm hearing from the neighbors is that people, because it's easier to drop people off going to work, drive down the cul-de-sac, drop them off, they walk through the gate, and then they're on campus, as opposed to maybe accessing off of Imperial or off of Ross.
But you know that we actually added a gate that's between the temporary parking and the medical office building. So I would love for you to come stand in my office, because I can see it.
Right.
This is really where the staff is being dropped off, not on Popular.
But I concur. It seems to me that an easy solution would be to install some kind of security so that only people that have, that should be using the gate could only use it via some kind of card or some kind of code or some mechanism. I think that's viable, but
again, I think that gets back to a point that I made earlier. Unless we have counters out there that shows us that between, 7:30 in the morning and 8:30, we have 75 cars going down Poplar, we may be fashioning a solution that's really not necessary. And that's why I just really think it's important for us, when we're making some of these decisions and thinking about new restrictions, that we're doing it in a mindful way, right? Because I think our answer would be different if it was 3 cars going down Poplar versus 75 cars going down Poplar, right?
But it also, it appears to me that, and I think it was actually written in one of the letters that we got from the neighbors, that their complaint, I see their issues being raised, not so much about this particular project, but the overall scope of everything that's been going. And I think that neighbors have asked a legitimate question as to, okay, so what's the plan? What's the overall master plan so that people are aware of what, other things that may be coming, what's the permanent resolution? So I'm not sure if we're ready to answer that today or not, but I think that's a legitimate question that I think we're being asked.
When we're done building the ancillary services building, which is the building that's going to be adjacent to the emergency room, and the expansion of the ED, which is now being delayed actually until we finish the other smaller project. That's our delay working with OSHPD. We're going to have a total of 604 parking spots for a need of about 590. So we still have an excess parking based on the requirements that we have.
So if hypothetically,
Yes, sir.
if the residents that live on the north side of Poplar, if the hospital was to purchase their homes, which I think you expressed that there's an interest as long as the price fell within a fair market value.
Right.
What would the hospital do with those homes? Tear them down and use them as parking, or would other usage be developed?
We would actually think about parking first, and secondly, we would think about a facility, an actual warehouse and a place where folks can put their equipment so that we can fix the hospital when equipment is down. We have biomedical equipment engineers, so parking is probably the #1 priority for us right now.
Okay.
So, Dr. Edward, if I could,
Yes, sir.
I apologize if I put you in a tough position by asking this question, but in the near future, do you anticipate demolishing this building, 1204 Poplar?
No, absolutely not.
Do you foresee putting a cement slab in the backyard so that there's no more landscaping, but it now becomes parking for staff?
If allowed by the city, I'll be more than happy to do that. Actually, it will be one of the first things that we would do.
So can I then switch over to Ms. Villacaña and ask, if that project were to happen, would that impact the negative declaration?
No,
Would we
it would improve the situation because you would have additional parking where the employees who are working at 1204 Poplar can actually park there, or anybody else, if whatever the hospital. So it would add additional parking spaces to the overall parking plan that the hospital has.
But you will have to revise the mitigated negative declaration.
Oh, that was, yes,
That's his
yes.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Okay, and until that happens, we wouldn't know what that declaration would be, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, we would do the analysis and come back with it,
Okay, thank you.
It'd be better than it is now.
But I want to add, sir, that if you give me the opportunity to actually have more parking, I will take that. So I don't know the legalities behind what was just said, but if you give me the okay, I will make it parking.
So I will just say that if we were to move forward, and as you mentioned, your anticipation is to improve parking on the property, at least for myself, I would be inclined to move in that direction. My question then would be for the folks who are against this to begin with, whether that vision, that idea, even addresses their concerns. So I guess I'll pause to hear from anybody that has comments to make.
We ready for the public comment?
Sure.
First, I have 2 speaker slips on this issue, item number 16. First being Mario Bustamante.
Good afternoon. My name is Mario Bustamante, the 680 West Main Road. I own a house at 1264 Ross, where my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law live. And it's a big burden. I know he mentions that the hospital wants to think parking first. They had that empty building, the site, forever. They built a new medical building there. During the day, it's pretty empty as far as people using that parking lot. My mother-in-law just recently had heart surgery, and I've had to go all the way to Buckland Park to park, to come back to the house to check on her, because the employees use Ross Street to park. So I think it is important that at least the residents of Ross get that parking issue established. There's days where you can't even put the trash out; they won't pick it up because the cars are so packed together that you put it in and they won't even pick up the trash. So then I got to go and pick it up and go take it myself. If they wanted to be responsible about the parking, instead of building that building next to the hospital, they should have used that as parking for their employees. They could have done what the Clínicas del Pueblo did, going out to in front of the mall and building their new building with excessive parking all the way out there. They could have built that building anywhere else in the city of El Centro with all the land that's out there and open up those offices out there.
I have two comments, and it's great to see you, Mr. Bustamante. Two things. I think this goes back to our point, Ms. Villacana, that let's look to a holistic approach with regard to the permitted parking. That would drive me crazy if I could not put my trash cans out to have them collected. So let's include Ross as one of those streets under consideration for the permitted parking. With regard to locating that medical office building, which was essentially a replacement for the building that was there that was damaged in the earthquake, if money were no object, absolutely the hospital would have looked for an alternative site. But the fact that we are mandated to make very, very costly seismic changes to the hospital, it was simply not feasible from a financial standpoint to look for another office building or medical office building to be sited somewhere else. There's also the synergies of having that medical office building adjacent to the hospital campus, because there's a lot of cross activity that goes on, not only with the provision of medical care, but also having our staff being able to access both the main campus and the medical office building. So if we could find a pot of gold.
So that parking structure, how many parkings does it have? That parking structure?
Medical office building?
The medical offices.
84.
84? How many new employees went into there?
Well, but the parking at the medical office building is not employee parking.
That's what I'm saying. They're taking up all the residents.
No, because we built an additional lot behind there for how many?
In the last 2 weeks, we've had to call the Centro PD to have cars towed away because they're blocking our driveways. So it is an issue. And the workers have come straight across from the street out to move their cars. We've given them the opportunity not to be towed or not to be ticketed. The only thing we ask the El Centro Police Department is to have them move it so that they can go into the parking lot.
And I agree that would be horrible if I was facing the same scenarios. And you know what? I think, to be honest with you, intuitively, I would think that some, if not most of those cars that are parking along Ross might be employees that choose to park there because it's probably more convenient. But I think the mitigation that is being proposed to be analyzed to restrict parking along Ross as well for residents only via a permit, and anyone parking there without a permit can get some kind of citation. That, from my perspective, should mitigate that.
Yeah, and I hope that comes soon because, like I said, it's a real big problem there.
No, I'll listen to the next one. Thank you. The next speaker slip is Mr. Rick Dubois.
Du Bois.
Du Bois. My apologies.
I'm not a Dubois. We live at 1535 Cypress, and I invite any of you from 8 to 4 to sit in my front yard and watch the cars. It's not, the speeding is mostly high school kids. But this morning I had 2 hospital employees in my front yard and I know that because I watched them walk across the street. And catty corner from us, there were 3 cars, and they also got out and walked to the hospital, where the house proposed is, there are always cars parked there. Come from Ross to Pepper, and then come back by at 5 o'clock and the street's empty. But during the daytime, the street's full. And people come around the curve, I know the police know that curve, and there's a dip. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And even if you make that an office building and you put 6 cars in the back, you're gonna have, the curve is still gonna have people parking, and it's not residential because there is no residential right there. That's the doctor's. And in front of my neighbor's house to their catty corner, there's people parked there, but come 4:30, poof, street's bare, just like the picture showed. But that's my biggest concern, is parking.
Okay.
So,
But,
thank you, sir. So you've heard that one of the recommendations to mitigate the issue that you're facing is by converting Cypress along some of the other streets as permitted only parking for residents?
Yeah.
Would that result, no?
we have 4 generations that live in our house.
Okay.
And we have service nurses and physical therapists that come, so therefore we'd have to be able to give them a card so that they don't get towed. And sure, on the weekends, it's perfect.
But Mrs. Villacaña indicated that homeowners can get four permits, and if the need for more can be justified, that more can be issued. How many would you need in order to address your need?
For just the vehicles we have would be 8. I mean, we have daughters that come by, check on grandma. We're in and out all the time. And like I say, we have physical therapist that comes in, a home nurse that comes in, and it's not always the same home nurse. True enough, they could probably park there and nobody'd catch them. But it'd be that one day that they park there and the parking patrol comes by and they're ticketed.
And there are circumstances in which all 8 people with cars will be there at the same time?
Oh, very, very possible.
Can I ask a question, if I may? Mr.
Sure.
Boys? And that is, I want to make sure that in my mind, I'm categorizing every concern that's coming up and addressing it separately. So I understand that there's a potential issue with the cul-de-sac gate. I think that that cul-de-sac gate, in its current form, could perhaps incentivize, invite staff to travel that area more so than local residents would prefer. There's a question of speeding, parking, and then there's specifically 1204 Poplar.
Right.
Which I'm being asked to weigh in on whether or not there's a negative declaration, a mitigation negative declaration, whether or not we want to change the amendment, the general plan amendment and the zone change, right? My question to you is, with all the concerns that are kind of, and some of them may cross paths, some of them may be its own isolated. If 1204 Poplar and what ECRMC is trying to do, if they were self-sustaining as far as providing their own parking so that not one more car based on them acquiring it and changing of the plan would be on the street because they would be able to provide it on their property, do you still find that to be an issue?
I will say so until employees, because the people that get out are nicely dressed like you. in the morning and they have their briefcase, you know, they're not going to Wilson, they're going to the hospital. And that's, I mean, I have no objections to them parking there, it's free. But when it gets overcrowded, we don't know whose vehicle is what, who's parking there. You know, give your employees a sticker to put on their windshields.
No, yeah, and don't get me wrong.
We know they're hospital employees.
Don't get me wrong. I understand that parking in itself is an issue, and like I mentioned, speeding, parking, the cul-de-sac, all those things could probably
Right.
be, you know, we can brainstorm as to how we address that in the future. But I want to stick to 1204 Poplar because that's what's on the agenda.
Sure,
And so
sure.
I want to say that we may not be able to answer, or I may not be able to address all of your parking concerns today.
No.
But let's do that in the future. My question is, if they're self-sustaining as far as their parking, and if they're able to provide enough parking for the employees that are going to be working there, and not a single car is going to be added to the street per the use of that house, is that still not good enough?
Well, I won't say it's not good enough, but what I'm asking is take a look at it some morning at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and then count the number of people that would be working in that office and how many cars are gonna be there. I think you're still gonna find the parking in front of the house is still gonna be going on. And I have no objections to it.
Sure.
I mean, but the street's narrow through there, and when you get cars, a solid line of cars in there, it's dangerous for everybody.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question to Norma. In regards to changing to a zone change and thus eliminating the off-street parking for residential if we choose to rezone, what would be the feasibility or what has been past practices about possibly painting that curbing red and taking it completely out of anybody's ability to
I'm
park
going
there?
to defer to Mr. Campos.
So I'm assuming you're stating the curb right in front of the 1204 Poplar property and
Correct.
painting it red.
Yes.
Usually red curb is if there's a sight distance concern or something triggering. It's just not something that we would do in just because. I mean, we can look into that option, but we've also looked at other options just to try to reduce speed, like potentially coming in with a speed hump policy, but that's longer goal. Regarding the red curb, it's usually a corner area only, and be difficult to justify as why. It can be done for sight distance if the sight distance becomes a problem with excessive parking. But volumes in that area are not, that corner wouldn't be that high to probably trigger it.
So there's nothing that restricts us from being able to do it if we choose to do so?
I'll have to get back to you, but probably not.
What about just loading and unloading only? I mean, or a 10-minute parking zone? I mean, I'm a little concerned with regard to just going into a red zone. But I think, folks, that a couple of things that kind of going through my brain. One is, on the one hand, this is really kind of a nice problem to have. The fact that we have a medical center that is providing such a variety of services that we now have, the number of patients that we have. We're providing specialties now and access to care that we never thought possible. So, I mean, coulda, woulda, shoulda, if in 1958 or whenever that hospital was established, somebody then had a crystal ball and could imagine the success of the hospital, the number of patients, the number of specialties, especially following our affiliation with UCSD. So in one way, it's kind of a nice problem to have. The other thing I think we need to keep in mind is what we're looking at is a very small change with regard to what the hospital wants to do. And if they're going to be, in my mind, self-sustaining with regard to the parking, they're going to improve the landscaping, the building's going to be occupied, it's going to be nicely maintained. I don't have an issue with that, but I think what this has given us the opportunity to do is look at the larger community impacts as a result of the success of the hospital. And I think that we've come up with some very good ideas with regard to an overall neighborhood parking plan that we need to like really put some thought into. We need to revisit the gate access. I know Dr. Edward at every single board meeting gives us an update with regard to employee parking. You told us how many employees have been cited, how many have been towed, and all the rest. I think that just speaks to a larger issue that we have to keep looking for solutions. It was mentioned about the Imperial Avenue and the property that it now belongs to the city where the library is, Imagine School. We'd be more than happy to turn that into an employee parking area if you folks can figure out a way to provide transportation back and forth a couple times a day. I think that this gives us an opportunity to find solutions. It's brought it to the forefront. I think we need to be mindful that what's in front of us now is a very, very limited project, and that the hospital, it really has no plans other than to move 5 employees in there to work, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think, I don't totally disagree with you, but I think that there's 8 families that probably would. And I think that's where we need to try to figure out how we come together and mitigate that. There's eight remaining homes that people live in and raise a family or whatever they're doing on a daily basis. And then you've got all the ancillary homes in the area that are also being impacted. And yes, to a point, it is nice to have the success of the hospital. But if I lived there, I'd probably be upset too, as I think all of us would be. And so I think what the residents that live in that area are looking for is some level of mitigation that puts their mind at ease. And I would be fully supportive. And is that like a shed or a garage or something in the back of 1204?
It's a shed of sorts we can remove.
So it seems to me, and I don't have an aerial view of that, but it seems like you'd get more than 6 spots if you converted that entire area to parking. Maybe it'd be 8 or 10. And if we were to look at, and I like your idea, Cheryl, of maybe loading zone instead of completely red, but I think we've got to assume that not every employee is going to be a good employee when it comes to adhering to parking policies, because they might be running late that day. And they might have good intentions, but they're running late and they're going to park the first place they can. And so we have to, I think, assume that there's going to be people that are not going to always listen to direction of parking where they should be parking.
Oh, we already know that, yeah.
Yeah, we know that.
We know
And
that.
So if we can do things that are going to help that area, like paint it as a loading zone only, and Abraham, if you could look into what that may or may not be restrictive-wise. If we can redo the negative deck to include however many parking spots we can fit into that area, I think
We'll maximize those.
Yeah, I think that would help, even to the point that if you're only having 5 employees there, and it looks like you could probably fit 4 vehicles where the existing driveway is. If you added another 8 or 10 spots, that should take, 5, 6 people that have been parking on the street off of that area and put them into, in essence, hospital parking.
Absolutely.
And get off of the streets for the residents. So I think if we can look at some of these things and help mitigate the concerns of the residents in that area, I could be supportive of this, but I think first we need to, redo the negative deck and include those parking. I think that's, and we're also going to have to, even though the parking passes might not be ideal for everybody, like Mr. Du Bois, as far as how many people you have in and out of your home, I think it would probably alleviate some of the issues up and down the street with some of the other homeowners, where it would free up extra spots. So I think we should move forward with that also.
So, Mr. Mayor, I agree with both Ms. Walker and Mr. Jackson, I do agree that this project in isolation does not create a lot of impacts, because the impacts can be mitigated through some modifications and additional parking. But I think that, Dr. Hayward, I know you're committed to be a good neighbor.
Yes, sir.
We're committed to be good neighbors, and I do believe that the cumulative impacts of everything going on is having an effect on the neighbors. So if we're gonna be good neighbors, we have to find solutions to their problems and issues that they're raising. I believe that within this conversation, we've raised a number of options that I think are viable. Personally, I like the idea of restricted parking for residents only. I like to hear more from the residents if they feel that that may be something that maybe may meet their needs or not, but we can defer that conversation. But I do think that we need to find a way to continue to provide the services that we do, but at the same time, find a resolution for the neighbors. Because, yeah, I agree. If this was happening in front of my house, I would not be happy either.
I agree. It's a tough situation, but I think that this is an isolated project, and I think we can mitigate the impact to your day-to-day life. So I think we need to take extra steps to make sure that everybody's being a good neighbor, and of course, that we don't have that amount of congestion where it affects you. Do we have direction?
So, I think there was a request, Mr. Mayor, to continue. I think there's a neighbor that wishes to address the council that it was not able to attend today, and I'm okay with continuing the three hearings that relate to this. Also, that would allow staff some opportunity to come back and kind of explore some of the options that we talked about. So if there's a pleasure of the council to continue this meeting, then I'm okay with that.
For 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
For the next meeting.
So items number 16, 17, and 18 to be continued.
Can I ask a quick question? Does this delay your operation in any way for use of this property? And is that a?
Sir, I'm going
Just as
to
a
tell you, every
procedural-
time we delay, actually, it adds to my cost because I have to refigure out my timeline. I have a timeline with Oshpod that allows me to move certain offices, and I've been waiting for this. Frankly speaking, on multiple occasions, we are asking for issues like this to help us, and there's always delays. It costs a lot of money. The delays of resubmitting packages to Oshpod is anywhere from $15,000 to $195,000. I can't ask for another extension from them. So the delay here is not really beneficial to me. It costs money, and it costs money out of my bond dollars that's supposed to go back actually supporting physicians that should be taking care of patients. So I know that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to delay, but delaying and delaying doesn't allow me to move staff out of where they're at so I can actually start to deconflict the lab issue and the observation unit and expansion of the work that needs to do. I need to close corridors and move staff internally that you won't see as part of any of this. But this helps me, and without that space, I'm really hurt.
I was gonna say, from a procedural standpoint, I think there was a motion, there should have been a second for discussion. And I would so make that second if the mayor wants, if there's gonna be further discussion.
What was the motion?
To continue.
Oh.
Till for
Can
2
you
weeks.
fill out a speaker slip and then we'll,
Was the motion to continue?
For
Yes,
2 weeks.
So yes, I'd like to make a motion that we continue this. I understand Dr. Edwards' concerns, and I don't want to push this back much further than 2 weeks, but I think that if we're going to be consistent with our commitment to be good neighbors, it's good neighborly to allow a continuance to hear from other people. Perhaps the comments and the discussions that we have had today will have other people show up to the council meeting and provide their own input. I think so. I understand that, but I'm comfortable with a 2-week continuance and no more than that.
well, and I think that within that 2 weeks, we'd be able to figure out how many spaces we can fit into that backyard, what kind of timeline We can get a recommendation from Mr. Campos with regard to what color do we paint that curb. If something else, we get,
If I may, I
Yeah.
was looking at the city attorney because if we consider the building of the parking lot in the backyard, I think we're gonna have to open up the environmental document, and that's gonna take longer than 2 weeks because we would have to reroute it again for public review. So it just,
A suggestion, and I'm not suggesting I know how to achieve this. If there is a way to try to have contact with the people who want input here, to ask them about the idea of that parking, it might speed things along. I think there are points on both sides. If I live next door, I might not want people parked in the backyard. On the other hand, if I live next door, maybe I'd rather have them parked there than in front of my house. Unfortunately, putting an impervious surface in your backyard will slightly change the impacts in your mitigated negative declaration. It'll still be a mitigated negative declaration. It'll have to be recirculated for another 20 days and the hearing renoticed. That's at least 6 weeks.
So, not to challenge it, but I want to make sure they understand this. So if we have a project that within the discussion provides for additional mitigation to the impacts, that triggers another review period for the negative deck? That doesn't make sense to me.
If you were to condition this project to provide that mitigation, you need to address in your CEQA document the effect of that mitigation. If this were like a study to look at parking or look at groundwater or something like that, that's different. But this one would have an impact that would not be addressed in any other way.
so then let me ask you this. If in 2 weeks, we continue it for 2 weeks for additional testimony, we approve it as is?
Yes, ma'am.
Hospital moves in, they use the 3 parking spaces in the driveway, and they come back to us in a couple of months and say, you know what, we'd like to reconfigure the backyard to add parking?
There's 2 answers. It isn't.
It would not disrupt their use of that building as it was currently being used,
It would
right?
require additional environmental review, and one of the concerns here has been that because of the nature of the hospital's expansion, and sometimes their plans have changed, you have a piecemealing effect. If you're going to do the project, CEQA would suggest that you do it all at once. Is it wrong? Not necessarily. Is there a preferred way to do it? Yes, and that would be to do it now. I'm not discounting Dr. Edwards' comments. CEQA would prefer that you do it all at once because it really is one project. If the hospital isn't sure they want to do that and they need some time to decide, then in fact it could be addressed in that way.
What was the purchase date of this of the property?
We actually submitted this request in February of 2018, over a year plus.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I absolutely understand your situation, and it seems to be a rather tough one, Dr. Edwards. And I don't think any of us want to incur additional cost, and especially expend bond money that should be spent elsewhere. But whenever I look at things like this, I look at, would we do this for a private business that was operating? And I probably over scrutinize our relationship with the hospital because we own it, and because I think there's a perception that the rules aren't always applied the same. I don't believe that's true. I think we have always done that, and I think this council's been very good about treating everything the same. But I don't want to get into a situation where, if we go through this situation where we kind of circumvent CEQA to, in essence, piecemeal this project, I asked myself the question, would we do that for another operation other than something that's associated with the city? I don't believe we would. And because of that, I would caution my colleagues in going down that road. And I think it opens up a perception that there's 2 sets of rules, one for city projects and one for private individuals or private projects that come to the city. I don't want to be a part of that. I think we need to play on a level playing field for all parties. I don't like the fact that we have to go back out for another 20 days and it delays your project and it delays, it incurs more cost. But public perception is something that I don't think either one of us want to go down that road and be negative. and we already have a situation where you have homeowners in the community that aren't real jazzed about the situation. It's been a long, and I agree, this is just one little piece of the project, but cumulatively, over the last year and a half, it's been probably disruptive for a lot of people in that area. I just don't think that we want to go down that road. I don't think we should.
Council member, I just want to make sure that I commend actually this city manager and her staff, because I wish that you could sit through the meetings with them. They watch everything I do, not hourly, but I think Marco Besso receives minute by minute requests for updates. They're out there with inspectors. I know
Absolutely.
I get emails that, hey, the city was out looking at this, the city was out looking at this. So they're really not giving us anything that's not within whatever
No, absolutely, and
construction
I
guidelines.
agree with
And I'm
that.
sorry if I can't follow
Yeah.
the lawyer's conversation about CEQA. That's beyond me. It's way over my head, and
It's okay. It's beyond some of us too sometimes. No, I don't believe that we do. I have people that say that we do. I don't believe we do, because I think we've always adhered to treating every applicant the same, and I mean, we charge you the same fees. You know, in essence, we charge ourselves fees to build.
I pay those, sir.
We do all the things that we would do for a private, outside the city. But I think, when we talk about circumventing CEQA to piecemeal this project, I don't think we would do that for a private enterprise. And that's why I caution my colleagues that we want to go down that road, because I think the perception would be is that we're playing by two sets of rules.
Well, I think that to Betsy's, or Ms. Martin's point, that we may be talking about a solution that nobody wants, right?
I'm concerned that might be
Possibly.
the case.
So what I do support the 2-week continuance only because we have generated a lot of disruption, we meaning the hospital. We've generated a lot of disruption in that neighborhood. I think that we've identified a number of issues, opportunities, and 2 weeks would allow both staff at the hospital and leadership at the hospital, at the city and the hospital, to come back, answer a number of questions, provide additional input from those that have requested that we continue it. But 2 weeks is it, we make a decision and we go.
I would support that. I think also that 2 weeks gives us time to maybe instruct staff to make contact with the specific homeowner. I agree that maybe this isn't, the perfect solution. We think it might be the perfect solution, but the neighbor might think something different. So if we can maybe make direct contact with that homeowner and find out what that person's feeling is, that I think that would expedite the process.
Okay. And we had somebody else that
Before
wanted
we
to speak.
close the public hearing, we do have a late slip from Mr. Martinez.
Yes, good evening, council. I apologize for the late entry. I am actually the homeowner directly west of this property at 1208 Poplar. I'm going to keep this short, just 'cause I know I'm sure everybody wants to go home at this point and bypass this whole conversation. But in some of the things we talked about, or I heard you guys speak about today, the good neighbor practice you guys are all looking for. I have video from this past Friday the 15th of the maintenance that's supposedly keeping the grounds of the property in good shape, which I can assure you, as being the direct neighbor, it's false. The lawn is always full of weeds. If I invite anybody to come by in the morning, tomorrow morning, or any other day of the week, the gutter that is just adjacent to that property is always overflowing with water because their sprinkler heads are broken. And the video I have here on my phone is a maintenance worker who routinely goes around that property, driving at excessive speeds in a golf cart down the sidewalk. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out there, and I take pride in my lawn. It's one of the things I do. And I have tracks from the golf cart in my lawn, broken sprinklers. I've asked specifically the driver of this golf cart at least 3 times to repair one broken fence panel on the back. Yet to happen. I've made contact with the grounds, whoever it is that's in charge of that at the hospital. Never heard back. I've bought the house 6 years ago. Since then, it's been headache after headache after headache. I work odd hours. I get off in the morning, and it's constant noise. I always hear people flying by, scraping at the gutters because they're flying way too fast. The gutter's directly in front of my bedroom window. So I hear them going over that all the time. And I think the solution, or the proposed solution, which would be changing all that area into parking is a terrible idea. I just recently had my house appraised considering selling because it's just always a headache there. And the appraiser told me that the more the hospital moves in, the less my house is worth. So doing more of the taking out areas of the home and adding parking structures there, it's gonna ruin my property value as it already has. So that proposed idea, I pray that you guys don't let that go through because it's only gonna make it a more negative impact for myself and my family. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, and I think being the direct next door neighbor to this home, I should have some sort of consideration into what's going on here at this home. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
I would be glad to show the video if you guys have the time.
I think you need to show it to Dr. Edward,
Okay.
the CEO at the hospital.
Okay, well, that takes care of that one.
I think we have a motion,
And
a
so-
second. I'm going to call for the question.
I had a comment or a question to make, if you don't mind. I was waiting for the last, and that is, based on city council's direction or advice, am I to understand that it would be appropriate or it wouldn't be legal if this mitigation negative declaration were to move forward today, and then a couple months later, the hospital wants to, make some improvements, to do some parking, and then do that? That's what you stated, correct?
It would not be illegal. CEQA has a concept called piecemealing. If you have a project that's going to be done in stages and you do separate environmental review for each stage, that doesn't comply with CEQA because you're supposed to do the project all at once. One of the comments that we have received here, and it's just how things happened, is that there has been piecemealing as the properties were acquired one by one. There was a hospital expansion. I don't think it was intended to be that way. So if it's possible to address the suggestion and include it, if people want it excluded and move forward, it would be a better practice under CEQA.
Okay, so with that said, I guess my question is, for Dr. Edwards is, would you prefer to just have this property as is and us being hesitant on making any improvements, or would you prefer to just wait and have a secret environmental document be prepared for what your final vision and use of this property would be? Because what I'm trying to make sure is that the 2 weeks that get counted, those 2 weeks be part of the 6 or 8 weeks that would take to develop a new environmental project, and it not be 2 weeks, just for 2 weeks from now for us to say, oh, by the way, that's what we're gonna do, and it be another 6 to 8 weeks from that.
I would love to have the property as is, being allowed to park 4 cars on the current existing driveway without having to worry of expansion of that side or whatever that expansion. If it means that we get approval so I can move the staff out, let them start to use this property, relocate the physicians. By the way, this house is currently being used for physicians that are staying with us overnight. So if there is an emergency situation, they're there. I also want folks, before they leave here tonight, to understand that the physicians that work in the medical office building, and actually I have one sitting in the back, Dr. John Daly is a brilliant physician. In case something happens during a procedure, he's there to respond and or have the ability to move a patient from the location of where he's doing some procedure back in the hospital so a surgeon can take a patient into the ORs and actually care for that patient. So the location of the medical office building next to us is very critical. Where I put the physicians, I'm trying to work with them on making them feel comfortable so that they can have the 2 or 3 hours sleep they can get and be able to get back there. Putting my non-clinical staff out there now is going to help me start to move things inside the hospital to get moving on the rest of the projects. It would help me just to have the 4 parking spot and the house for the marketing office.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Edward. So do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move that we continue the meeting for our second meeting that will be our
The first meeting in April.
first meeting in April.
Do we have a second?
Be April
I'll
2nd.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
And we will be renoticing the residents. to be sure that they know this is coming.
Break. 5 minutes.
That was
Aye.
4 with 1 no.
Right.
Diane, did you get that? It was 4 with 1 no.
4 with 1 no.
Mr. Oliva?
So I think we want to give the staff a little break. We'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll be back shortly. Calling the meeting back to order. We're going to continue with item 19, which is a user fee study, presentation by our Director of Finance, Leticia Salcido.
I am so happy to bring to you, good evening, Mayor and council members, the fee study that our department has been working on for the past year and 9 months. It's a lengthy process, very detailed, a lot of going back and forth between departments, consultants, documentation, meetings, reviews, and so on. So we're at the tail end of this project, and so we're very happy. Part of the cost recovery strategy is to adopt user fees to fund programs and services. Some of those programs provide a limited or no direct benefit to the community, only to the individuals that use that program or service. If fees are not a full cost, if we don't recuperate the full cost of the service being provided, that means that the city is subsidizing a part of that fee. And when that happens, there's limitations on the amount of money from the general fund that is used for other services. So we're subsidizing some, and it's taking away from other. It is very important that we have a fee study to determine the adequacy of the city's fees. And for that endeavor, we engaged Wilden and Associates, Wilden Financial Services, to help determine the reasonableness of our fees with regards to the services, with regards to the cost to the city of providing that individual service. The scope of the fees review was included all of the city departments, fire, police, parks and rec, library, clerk, city clerk, planning, zoning, engineering, and building. We have a presentation by Mike Medvey of Wildan, our consultant, and he will explain the process that we went through to be able to determine the adequacy of these fees with regards to the cost to the city. And here he is.
Mr. Mayor, before Mr. Medvey begins, his presentation will be on both item 19, which is a public hearing, and item 20. However, we will be asking you to act first and separately on item 19, the user study. And we do have a slight change in the resolution language when you get there.
All right. Thanks, Leticia. Good evening, honorable council members and mayor. I'm here to discuss the user fee study that we performed. It was a long process, as Leticia mentioned, and I have to thank the city staff especially, since the underlying content of the study really is the product of your work. We serve as the financial consultant in kind of a conduit role. We help turn those the data that we receive into fees, but really a huge amount of work goes to the city. So we appreciate everything that they did. What are user fees? User fees fund programs and services that provide benefit to individuals. Because they are of a fairly specific benefit, the law gives you a fairly broad latitude in how to establish them. They're not considered a tax, so there's no vote required, also not a special assessment. Fees are meant to offset the cost to the city that is incurred when people are requesting a service that just benefits them, people or entities, I should say. It needs to be voluntary, and when we establish the fees, They need to be determined based on a reasonable nexus between the cost of providing that service and the fee itself. To put it, as shortly as possible, the fee cannot exceed the reasonable cost of providing the service. And there are 2 exceptions to that, but I'll get to those later. Again, determine reasonable full cost. Each fee is calculated individually. This is part of the reason it takes so long. And the fees are based on what we call fully burdened hourly rates for the city's personnel. We start with the raw hourly rate, which is the salaries and benefits divided by the productive hours, so not including vacation or other overhead uses. We add on the departmental overhead. Basically, this would be the non-personnel costs of a department, but we're also excluding debt service and financing, basically the operating costs of a department that do not have to do with the personnel. We determine a percentage of that and add that on top of the raw hourly rates. And then on top of that, we allocate out the central services. So that would be the city clerk, the city council, city manager's office. The central overhead components are allocated out to each department. In this case, the allocation methodology we used was the standard allocation methodology that the city uses routinely. And after we do that, and we create timetables that show each employee and what hours they work on it, and we come out with full cost, up to 100% of that full cost may be recovered. So if you wish to charge less, then you can do that, but you just can't charge more. One of the things that that the user fee study does, we determine the full cost, and right next to that we list the fee. One thing to keep in mind as you're reviewing these, the condensed sheets in the back of the study that have all the fees listed out, is that any fee where the full cost exceeds the fee that we're charging, there is a subsidy being provided from the city to the person who's using that fee. So that's something to keep in mind. And we did go over each fee individually with city staff. We determined which ones we wanted to subsidize. These are generally ones that have kind of a community-wide general benefit component, like Parks and Recreation is one example of that. And then the ones that we recommend that you achieve the full cost recovery for, which would be things that don't have that community-wide benefit. These are the departments that were included in the fee study. This is reflected in the list of fees as well. These are the data inputs that we use, and like I said, this is almost all provided by city employees. We turn this into fees or into full costs, and then we work with the city to determine the fees. We use department budgets, salary and benefit information provided, and some other cost data, things like hourly employees, city attorney rates, things like that. Staffing structures, the cost allocation plan, again, we use the standard city cost allocation plan. Productive hours, 1,650 is a very common number used for these types of studies, and that's what we used. We acquired timetables in our Excel model that each staff member, and I know it's hard to believe because it is a lot of fees, they went through and filled in, a median, a reasonable estimate of how much time they spend on each of these fee tasks. So we actually, I do apologize for that second to last bullet point. We didn't measure activity level here to get you guys an estimate of how much the fee study would give you because that data was not available. But we did come here for our final meeting and go over each fee with Leticia and others to make sure that all the fees corresponded with city goals. Here's a visual representation of what I described earlier. You have the direct costs, so that's the hours that the city employees are putting in. The departmental overhead, it varies, but it could be something as simple as office supplies, standard operating costs for each department. Or in the case of Parks and Recreation, you're going to have things like electricity costs or those types of much larger line items, utility bills, other bills, basically, that come to the department. And the central service overhead, which it's more than just the city clerk and finance, but those are our examples. Here's everything, another visual representation of everything that goes into an example fee. And again, this is just an example. You might have an administrative analyst put in 15 minutes, and then a building inspector put in a couple hours. Engineering tech might put in a couple hours more. City attorney, plans examiner, looks like this is a planning fee as an example. And all those things go into determining the fee level, or actually the full cost. And then the fee level is up to and including that full cost. A lot of this is rehashing. And I was told to make this quick, so I can do that. We've worked with the city to include an annual inflation factor. This will hopefully reduce the need for the city to come back and redo this process again. The inflation factor will keep pace with the increasing costs, at least at in a reasonable way, and it will be based on the area CPI. So, did you have any questions?
I do. Could you go back to slide number 6, please? I have just a quick question about slides 6 and 7. So, one more. Okay. So when we talk about department budgets and staffing structures, how do we account for vacancies within a department, or are we dealing with actuals? Because as I'm sure you're aware, we have several vacancies within our police department and other areas. Most impacted would be the police department. So how do you deal with that vacancy factor?
Yeah, we do not deal with in 100% actuals. Certainly when actuals are available, we do.
Okay.
But if there's a vacancy, especially a recent vacancy, and the rest of the staff know generally what that employee would do on that particular task or what is required, we would include that, and we would include the expected salary that employee
Because
would have.
when we talk about department budgets, we know that we have salaries budgeted for vacant positions, but I guess that's, when you're looking at department budgets, you're actually not relying on that. You're looking at actual salary data. Okay. Then with regard to slides 7 and 8, you talked about those being for the overhead services, city clerk and finance, just as examples. So are there other departments like human resources and things that would be included in that
Yeah.
overhead?
Building maintenance
Okay.
is a big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I think one of the things that I didn't realize is we had not done a similar fee study since 2003.
Yeah, you're not alone. It is a big task to update the fees, but we feel it's really important. I mean,
Right,
as public finance consultants who do like every type of public finance,
Right.
you guys have a lot of control over this.
Right. And I really appreciate the recommendation with regard to an escalator, so that we don't wait another 15, 16 years before we look at this again. Thank you for your presentation.
Question. So I'm looking at the table where you have, the fully burdened hourly rates, and just so that I'm able to understand, so I understand this is salary, benefits,
Pension.
overhead-related costs that apply to each position here, right? So I was kind of looking at the highest, so a question arose in my mind. So for example, our city manager has a fully burdened hourly rate of $181. And our community services director has a fully burdened hourly rate of $236, so it's higher. Why would that be higher?
It's mostly because the community services director would basically have a portion of those central costs, whereas the city manager would not. And then also for community services, basically their department probably gets more bills, more operating overhead that gets allocated out to ours. It's not a perfect system, but this is the standard system that's used to develop fees, that we would take a department's operating costs and then allocate it out based on hours. Again, not perfect, but this is the way it's done, and we feel like this is the best methodology. If we tried to do a direct cost estimate for each fee, I'm not even sure that it would be possible to get through all the fees. If, for example, we were doing your rec leagues and we measured how many hours the lights were on for each game, and then how many games there are for each season, and how many teams there are for each, we're talking about really like a ton of work. And I'm not sure.
So those fees, like the lights fees, those get incorporated within the burden hourly rate? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Abraham, you might want to know you're the highest bird
Yes, I was
employee.
gonna, right.
Wear that badge proudly.
He is a burden.
He's very proud.
I don't have any questions, sir.
I just want to highlight that the fee study, the ones that you're proposing or the ones in the study are not development impact fees, right? They're not
No.
completely separate. I just want to make sure.
Totally separate.
Okay. Great.
I just have a comment. I guess I just want to say, Letitia, you and your staff and our consultant, looks like an incredible amount of work, obviously. Took a year and 9 months to get done. I can see why it's been since 2003 since we've taken on this task. But I also concur with Cheryl. I like the escalator clause. I think that that's going to keep us at least on par with where we should be every year. And I think it's always harder for our residents to digest a huge increase as opposed to chipping away every year. Maybe it's a 50-cent increase every year as opposed to waiting 10, 15 years and do a $5 or $6 increase. So I appreciate the, maybe, I don't know if that's standard or if that's outside the box thinking, but I appreciate it either way.
We recommend it, yeah.
I had one more comment. This was probably one of the best consultant reports I've ever read in terms of its being able to actually read through it quickly and understand. It was very well presented, so kudos.
Yeah.
Well done on your selection of consultants and well done on your work product.
I really appreciate that, thank you.
So can I ask a question more? So, can you, I know you explained it, but maybe you can explain it a little further. So, the amount of subsidy within the different fee structures vary from 0, 1%, and up to, it's 100%, but I see one, for example, that's got 79%, so it's all over the map. How did you figure that, the level of subsidy?
It's really, I would say that Letitia can probably speak more to the specifics, but in general, the more beneficial the fee is to the community, the more of a subsidy we have, the less beneficial it is to the community, the less of a subsidy we have. And as your consultant, that's what we recommend. There are also, you'll notice that there are also some penalties in there, things like code enforcement, and those don't obey the full cost principle. And then also rental of city property. It's, the rule in the law is whatever the market value is, and who better to determine the market value than the city. But yeah, things like recreation programs, we typically keep the subsidy level high because that is a benefit to the community. It's, when it comes to using general fund money to fund recreation programs, it's generally the type of thing that residents are okay with.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, last point, and this is just to make sure that I highlight, in this user fee study, it doesn't necessarily mean that every fee was increased, correct? That there were some
No.
fees that were actually reduced.
We try to
due this
stress
study.
that when we do these studies, not to expect every single fee to increase.
I just wanted to make sure I had that. Thank you.
Especially when there's such a huge gap between the last study and this study. Things can change, and your staff changes, and when we're going through and getting the timetables, we're we're here to produce a legitimate study, basically, by getting the actual hours that are put in, producing a reasonable cost, and then levying a fee up to that amount.
Mr. Let me ask, so I'm sorry, but let me ask a question about subsidy again, because it's not clear in my head. So I understand the big picture concept of those services that may have a direct public benefit, that you want to subsidize more those that do not. But, so there's a few, for example, that's got 68% and the other one is 64%. So is that difference subjective, or was it based on was it formula driven, or how does one become 68, the other one's become 64?
Yeah, the percentage is there to illustrate what the subsidy is, but when we went over each fee, I think it was the whole dollar value that staff was recommending.
Okay.
And then we came kind of back around on the back end and calculated the percentage. So, for example, I think for some of the planning fees, there was just a consensus developed on what would be considered a reasonable increase from the existing fee.
So it was somewhat subjective then, but you just applied whatever that percentage was to a subjective decision?
Correct.
So basically, there are no hard rules with regards to, as a guide to the city, to set these various fees. Yes, our goal is to recover the cost, the full cost. However, we also like to encourage participation from our citizens. We also look at whether or not our current community and our economic climate allows for us to charge the full burden rate. Sometimes that is not possible. So what happens is we met with all the departments, directors and supervisors, and we went through each individual fee to determine where we were in the past, our current fees, what our full cost would be, and then whether or not our community could afford such a fee. Basically, fees are based on the characteristics, the character of the city, and that's how we came up with those fees. So it was totally a team effort.
And I see, Letty, that some of the fees would have a differential fee for residents versus non-residents, right? A, how was that calculated for the non-residents? And B, what mechanism are we going to use to verify that?
I can't speak to the mechanism to verify that, but I can say that as we went over those fees for residents and non-residents, I think since those are recreational type fees, the goal was to recover more than we would be if we didn't raise them, to keep the general ratio of what residents pay to non-residents, and just to get closer to full cost than we would have been otherwise.
So it's a greater subsidy for residents than non-residents?
A greater subsidy for residents, for sure, yeah.
And Letty, have we thought about the mechanism to verify residency versus non-residency we haven't thought about that yet?
Council members, if I may address your question, we actually have that with the recreation fees, and basically with the manner that the staff has utilized is by asking, obviously, for identification to the individual, and then also providing utility bills that basically show that they do reside within the city of El Centro. So it's actually something that we started with the adult center with some of the classes. As you may recall, we are providing a lower fee to El Centro residents, and so we started that process, which is very common, what cities use when they implement resident, non-resident.
Well,
Anything further? Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're very welcome.
And this will be item 19.
Yes,
The
item
user fees.
19.
Was there a change in the language?
Yes, there's a change in the language of the, do you want to read it? Do you want me to? The finance director asked that in the 7th whereas beginnings that addresses the escalator, It read, whereas in addition, city staff recommends the adoption of an annual fee adjustment in July 1st of each year, commencing on July 1st, 2019, in the amount of the annual change and in the consumer price index, and then the remainder of the sentence.
Change in the consumer
Yes,
price index. Yes, thank you.
CPI?
So do we have a motion?
Are we back to,
Opening public hearing, do we have any comments? Seeing none?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was having a side conversation.
Sorry.
Can you repeat that, Ms. Martin?
In the seventh whereas, which addresses the escalator, at the request of the finance director, we need to clarify as follows. Whereas, in addition, city staff recommends the adoption of an annual fee adjustment on July 1st of each year, commencing on July 1st, 2019, in the amount of the annual change in the consumer price index. And then the remainder of the sentence, the paragraph remains the same.
Is there a limit not to exceed 3% per year?
Right, that's what the remainder of the paragraph says. To finish reading it, it isn't changed language. San Diego area for all urban consumers with a cap of 3%, the automatic escalator, which the city council finds will maintain such user fees as the reasonable cost of service provided plus overhead.
But
So just as-
as of what point in time, though? Because if we raise them on July 1st, right? But you won't have a real-time CPI as of July 1st, so are you going to? So,
Actually, there is,
So the annual change, it doesn't come out in January, but it does come out around like April, May.
Okay.
It'll be available.
actually, they
Comes out
do
in March.
produce the first half of the year and then for the second half of the year. So we can do it as of whatever applies to the July, so it would be the first half of the year. Calendar year, which would be our fiscal year.
okay, but how is that number going to be available? If we're
Oh,
going
it's
to raise the
available.
fees?
It's available. I have a history of the previous ones for both the first half and the second half. And on an annual basis, it has changed, 162 in 2015, 196, almost 2% in 16, 3% in 17, and so on.
Yeah, but my question is, when is that number released?
There's two numbers released. There's one number released at the first half of the calendar year, which would be the 6/30/19, which is the one that we would use for, to change it as of July 1st of 19. And then there's another one that comes out at the end of the year, for the second half of the year. So you just take, if you take the first half, you just take the first half of this year and the first half of last year, calculate the difference between the two, and that's your increase.
So Leticia, I have a question. If this is adopted and the fees change and whatnot, why would you not want to make the next augment be the July 1st of 2020 as opposed to this year?
There's a language in the thing where we're expediting it's the third resolution?
The urgency measure.
Yes. For the fact that in between this whole process, those rates, one of the reasons is those rates are lower than what they should be because during this time, we had the salary increases.
Of 3%.
So, of 3%, yes. We haven't raised our rates in forever.
16
So,
years.
yes. So, very good reasons.
Got it.
Just costs are higher now than what the report is actually telling you.
Diane, are we back to
No,
electronic balloting, or we're making motions?
yeah, we're making motions.
I would move to approve resolution, what are we at, 19-13?
13?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, we have a unanimous 5-0.
Thank you. If I may, I did the presentation up here, but I know that this would not have been possible without the assistance of my staff. And Carla was the lead person, and Carla, our accountant, Carla Chaparro, and I just want to acknowledge all of her work because it was very intense. And of course, we have our finance manager as well assisting us in everything, so just want to.
Well done.
Thank you.
Now, Moving on to item 20, I believe we're going to be continuing this as well.
We would request a continuance of till April.
April 2nd.
April 2nd.
April
Do we have-
2nd.
Do you have a motion?
I think there was a.
We do have a speaker slip from Mr. Browniard. All right.
I think that we,
Yeah, we're going to withdraw that, but.
We're going to ask if he's withdrawn.
Letitia? Ms. Salcido? There was a motion to continue the development fees, and I think you had a comment about budget presentations that you were requesting?
If I may, if we can continue this to the second meeting in April, the first meeting will be very intense with a presentation of the general fund budget, the first workshop for fiscal year 2020. I would really appreciate it.
Okay, that's fine
Yes,
with me.
thank you.
and if we could ask that you also continue item 21, which is the urgency version of item 20.
I would so move to take items 20 and 21 and continue them until April 16th, our second meeting in April.
Second. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have Walker down. I put Walker down.
Number 22, community sponsorship.
Moving on to new business, item number 22.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight I bring before you a request for a community sponsorship from Spread the Love Charity in regards to their annual Carne Asada Cook-Off event that is scheduled for March 30th. They've gone through the application process. The mayor has reviewed it and recommended that it come before council for discussion and approval.
Can I ask a question? Ms. Caldwell, can we go back to the agenda, or are these just not working at all?
We can try, we should be able to.
Okay, because I rely on an electronic
okay, sorry.
version.
Did they come up, Councilmember Walker?
Mine
Yeah,
did.
if you hit go to current, it'll take you to current.
Go current.
Up on the top, right here, left side, it says in blue, go to current.
Oh, perfecto. Thank you. Okay, good. Yes, I'm up and running.
There's several sponsorship packages that the city can take advantage of. Within this request, we also followed up with other departments to see if there was any in-kind sponsorship already being provided for this event. And there's an approximate $250 worth of in-kind that is being provided. I leave it open for council for discussion. And Ms. Solorio is here if you have any questions for her.
So, if I'm reading this correctly, the mayor's recommended a sponsorship of $250, but that obviously doesn't coincide exactly with these sponsorship levels.
Correct.
You good with that? I would move the recommendation of the mayor for a sponsorship of $250.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None? Seeing nobody opposing, it passes 5-0.
We'll
Thank you,
see
Jessica.
on
Thank you, Jessica.
See you on the 30th.
She's
Item
also
number-
very honest.
Item number 23.
Once again, I bring before you another request for a community sponsorship. This is from the Children's Foundation of Imperial Valley. They have submitted a request for their first annual Health and Fitness Expo, which is also scheduled for March 30th. This one is at El Centro Regional Medical Center. Again, they've complied with all the requirements. The mayor has reviewed it and has requested to bring it forward to council. There's several levels of sponsorship, and the mayor has requested or recommended a $250 sponsorship.
I would
And
move,
Ms.
Second.
Penland is available if you have any questions regarding her event.
I would move the mayor's recommendation of $250.
Second.
I'm sorry,
those in-
who's second?
I moved
Councilman
and Mr. Oliva second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
So we can go eat a bunch of tacos and then go to
Then
the
we'll work
hospital.
it out.
Event that's gonna be following the next week for the hiking, where
Great.
City
Awesome.
clerk.
Thank you.
Yes.
Our city clerk. Diane, right there.
Item number 24, discussion necessary action regarding the AMR facility use agreement. Chief?
Good evening again. So before you is the use agreement with AMR. The city and AMR, in the co-location of space, there was a discussions regarding fair market value. So we arrived at a number for that. We looked at the space that they were going to be utilizing that's dedicated to them, and basically come up with a calculation for that. So you have the agreement before you. I think beside the agreement, it's just the beginning of a great partnership between our agencies. I think it positions us uniquely to continue to have a say in shaping what EMS looks like within the city and in the county. You know, AMR has, you know, there's going to be some additional benefits to us as well. We've already discussed with them about purchasing of supplies, you know, leveraging buying power and such. And they, you know, their comments back were like, buy it from us. No one's going to beat our price. We're nationwide. We get the best prices out there. So we're going to see some other benefits from this relationship as well. AMR actually approached me about, we've talked before about 24/7 guarantee within the city of El Centro, and they initiated that conversation. So it's something that they're looking at moving forward. So again, this in front of you tonight, though, is the facility use agreement. They expressed desire to pay fair share. I ran some calculations based on available space within the city, both residential and commercial. Ran it by them, and they said yes. So
I just want to say, Chief, good job on this. I think, you know, obviously, we've got space in our facilities for this. It generates some revenue for us, but I think the more important part of this is exactly what you're saying, is the ability to have a say, the ability to have that buying power, which I think is incredible, and just the overall relationship between, you know, the city and that vendor in providing the service to our residents. So good job on working this thing out. I think it's going to be great for the city and great for our residents.
I have a question. What is their staffing model in terms of hours on, hours off? And where I'm going with this is, so with the assignment of your team at the fire station, they're eating meals together, they're cooking. Will they be joining in as part of that? Will they be having lunch with you folks, or how's that going to work out?
So at the beginning of this, their schedules did not align with ours. So
Okay.
they do work the same shift schedules. They are doing a 4896 schedule. We told them that it would probably help things if our schedules were aligned. So
Right.
they took steps to make that happen.
Okay.
So now it's familiar faces on familiar shifts. AMR is incredibly busy. You know, the city manager wrote a log on day one, and she's like, well, you know, we hardly saw him. And then on her other ride along, the same experience. And that seems to be the case. You know, when I drive by the stations and such, I'm looking to see if they're in the bay, and
Right.
you rarely see them. But yeah, they're participating in some of those things, like, you know, coffee funds and Staples funds and that type of thing. So
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
I would move to adopt resolution 19-14.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? It passes 5-0. Item number 25, discussion and any necessary action regarding the acceptance of the 2018 Housing Element Annual Report from our Community Development Director, Norma Villacaña.
Good evening again. This is our annual housing element report that needs to be submitted to the, to HCD on an annual basis. The reporting period is January 1st to December 31st, 2018. Just some of the numbers I wanted to highlight is the number of housing, new housing units in the city of El Centro. As you can see, 2018, we've had 185 housing units combined, single-family, multi, and accessory dwelling units. So we've had a significant increase in the amount of new units. And one of the reasons is, one of the reasons for that is that, as you know, we've had a couple of projects, hotel conversions along Adams Avenue.
Okay.
We've also had the YK American townhomes, town units that are being built right now. And we've also had approximately 18 accessory dwelling units throughout the city.
How many?
18 ADUs.
Wow.
We're
okay.
getting more applications now than we had before. So in total, we have 185 units. And if you combine that with the previous years, there's 412 units, new units that we have gained in the city of El Centro for the RENA numbers for the period ending 2021. So we still have a ways to go. Our RENA goal is 1924, and we still have 1,500 more units to add to our.
We're making progress.
We're making progress.
But the good thing is here
away.
is that we have them at all income levels. I mean,
Yes.
if we look at a lot of other jurisdictions at their RENA numbers, you see a lot of folks building at that moderate or above moderate income levels. But I think that this is a nice distribution.
Yes.
Of where we need to be.
And I'm not I think you're aware of the home funding, the Chelsea project, and we have another project. So we have 2 new affordable housing unit projects come in soon, hopefully.
Wow.
Great.
So at this time, we are requesting approval of our annual report, and once, if it's approved, we'll submit it to HCD.
Any
Move for
questions?
approval.
Do you have a motion?
As far as comments, if I may just say that I agree with Councilmember Walker that in other regions throughout Southern California, you always see council members, local stakeholders complaining that there isn't enough affordable housing in their region, that the focus seems to be on the moderate to higher end. And I was very happy to see that that's not the case
Yeah,
here.
our goal,
right?
yeah, it's pretty much spread out, yeah.
So thank you.
Did Efren make a motion?
Make a motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Silva, a second by Councilmember Jackson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, passes 5-0. I believe 26 and 27 are related.
Before I start, I was just brought up to my attention by our consultant, Mr. McGuire, that item 27 should go before 26 on this.
Okay.
And I just have one slide on this, for this project. Basically, I just kind of wanted to give you an overview what we're doing. This is, we want to form a lighting and landscaping district for the Lotus Ranch project. This was one of the conditions of approval for the project. We've engaged the services of Wilden Consulting Firm, which have provided us with the engineer report that's included in your packet. At this time, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. McGuire, and he will give you just a brief overview of what are the next steps to form this landscape district.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight before you are two resolutions, one which initiates proceedings, which basically calls for the engineer's report to be prepared, which is already done. So it's really kind of a 1972 Act formality, but it needs to be done. Then the next resolution is a resolution of intention, which basically preliminarily approves the engineer's report as presented, calls for the balloting of the property owners for the proposed maximum assessments associated with those properties, and establishes May 21st for the public hearing, at which time the ballots will be open and tabulated. As far as the district is concerned, I'll be happy to answer any questions. There's basically 574 single-family residentials planned for this particular development. There are a handful of lots in the first phase that have been subdivided already. Some of the lots have actually been sold to individuals, but there's only a handful of those. The bulk of the development is still yet to be developed. So what you're looking at in this report is establishing what the maximum assessment would be in today's dollars. And so we looked at all the improvements that are planned to be installed, developed a budget for those, and then based on the planned development of the properties, came up with an assessment rate, and that assessment rate is $481 per residential unit. There is rather than a CPI inflator, we've decided, because it's property owners prefer to know exactly what things are going to happen, we fixed a 3.5% annual inflationary adjustment to the maximum assessment. So the maximum assessment can continue to go up each year, although you may levy anything less than that depending on the actual costs that we need and cost of the improvements for that fiscal year. The budget is all comprehensive. It not only is budgeting for annual maintenance, but it's putting aside money for long-term replacement of those improvements down the road. So if you have any questions regarding that, I'll be happy to answer them. Ballots for this district will have to be mailed by April 5th. So that will be happening here shortly. City staff is reviewing the draft of the ballots and notices now. We plan on mailing them out actually sooner than April 5th, but April 5th is when they need to be mailed out, which is 45 days prior to the May 21st public hearing.
Have any questions?
Just in short, by establishing this district, would that, I guess, what I'm trying to figure out is, does it make those properties less enticing for anybody that's willing to purchase?
Pardon me, I didn't hear that. I heard a cough.
Sure, no, would creating this district, would it make it less enticing for customers to purchase homes in this region?
Not likely. The assessment the annual assessment we're talking about is $481 a year. That basically breaks, what does that break down to? I don't even know, a monthly basis,
Sure.
but $4 a month.
What is
or
the average?
$40 a month.
Can you just tell me just offhand the range of value of properties is estimated to be in this region or in this subdivision?
That I can't answer.
You mean the housing
Right.
prices? What will they be offered for?
Right.
Well, the developer, we've been working with the developer, and they've been advising the buyers that there is a lighting and landscaping district, so they haven't had any issues. The only thing they ask is, well, how much do you think it's gonna be? But they are aware. The price of the homes, I think they're 400 to 500,000, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
It's not like a Melrose. It's like a kills.
So how many property owners will get to participate in this ballot election?
There are 3 developers, and there's, I think, 5 individual property owners at this point in time.
Okay.
When we started this process, there was one developer.
Right.
And excuse me, what is the threshold for the actual balloting? Is there a threshold?
The threshold, the way it's done is what we do is we calculate the assessment based on the budget that's in the engineer's report, the $481 per residential unit. Each property is balloted because we're forming the district, and this assessment is based on build-out. Each property is assessed based on its proportional amount of dwelling units that will be developed on those properties. So a couple of the properties owned by the developers are like $140,000 based on, 211 units being built on those properties. So they vary in range, but the individual properties that have already bought lots, they'll get a ballot for $481. So it's representative of what their current maximum assessment would be, and the ballots are weighted accordingly. So theoretically, if the developer votes yes on this, it's going to pass.
And at what point then does the landscaping and lighting district actually then start moving forward with?
Based on discussions we've had with staff and the developer, the city does not anticipate taking over any maintenance for this upcoming fiscal year, so we're not actually levying an assessment for 1920.
Okay.
The first assessment will likely be 2021.
Okay.
And then it'll be based on the improvements that are installed at that point in time, whatever's come online.
Very good, thank you.
So Norma, I don't know if we can answer this, but the third bullet here says that this assessment is going to fund the maintenance of landscaping and lighting within the Lotus Ranch subdivision. Can someone be a little more specific as to what that means in terms of the actual improvement and maintenance that will take place?
Sure. If you take if you look at the map that she has up on that Norma has up on the presentation, you can see the green. You can see all the red dots, which are lights.
Okay.
The green areas are where there will be landscaping installed and maintained through the district, as well as the landscaping and trails around the drainage basins on the perimeter, which is the blue areas.
Years ago, it was like,
Okay.
The 1972 Act doesn't permit you to actually maintain drainage facilities, so the culverts and things like that are associated with the drainage basins won't be maintained through this district. But the landscaping associated with it, including a portion of the park, although it's a large park, a lot of that has a general benefit nexus to it, so a good portion of that is not being funded by the district. But it is also a local neighborhood park, and so there is a special benefit to the properties within the development for that park, and so they'll pay for a portion of it.
yeah.
And Norma, do we know at this point in time what kind of landscaping that will be? Is it grass and trees and things, or is it the desert?
No, we
look?
do have landscaping plans that have been submitted, and mostly it's drought, it's no, very minimal or no grass. Mostly trees.
You don't like the trees?
I don't like the desert look.
You live in Centro,
You do know
I like greenery.
where we
It's
live.
gonna be like a drip
Drought-tolerant
system, not a sprinkler, not irrigation system, so.
Thank you.
To speak to that a little bit, because this is being put together way far in advance of development, the budget that was established in the maximum assessment has some flexibility in it for additional landscaping in terms of what they may maintain. It's a little bit, we budgeted for a little bit more than just trees and drought-tolerant landscaping, but we didn't budget for turf either, so.
That's just my personal preference.
So do we have a motion?
Item 27 is to initiate this, right?
Yes.
If there's a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem, I'll second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilman Oliva. And that's to adopt resolution number 19-15. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Passes 5-0. Number 26. We have a motion by Councilmember Jackson. Do we have a second?
That'd be
Second.
19-16.
Yes. We have a second by
Second. Yep.
Councilmember Walker. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on, do we have any legislative action?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have a nice surprise for you. We have an item to add. It is a letter for Councilmember Silva. Can you present that?
Yes, is the letter here somewhere or
Do you
no?
need a draft? I think we have one.
So I was approached at the air show by a group of people that are working with the legislature to name a bridge over in Hopeville on honoring a fallen soldier, Silva, not related to me. I think Eric Silva. And so I was approached by a group of people asking if the city would provide a letter of support endorsing the action to name this on behalf of a fallen soldier in Imperial Valley. I know it's not directly related to El Centro, but I think that we should probably, submit something the mayor can sign. And so I'm just asking for council approval for the mayor or myself, either one, to submit a letter of support on behalf of this action.
If you'd like to add this by 4/5 vote before you move on to either approve or disapprove the item, please.
I'd move to add.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have 5.
My question, and I don't know if you know this ever, is what's the tie to El Centro? Is it just a support letter, or is there some?
That's just a letter of support.
Okay. All right.
Do you have,
I'm in favor of doing a letter of support from the city of El Centro.
do we happen to know the bill number that is carrying this?
It's ACR 37.
Oh, okay.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think the mayor made the
I
motion.
moved.
I second.
And I think, Dan, that it would probably be more appropriate for the mayor to sign the letter.
And we can get you copies of the letter if you'd like them. Yeah, I think maybe we should do that.
Concurring resolutions are always good. Not always, but this one.
Moving on, do we have any public comments? Seeing none. Task force reports and council member reports. Who wants to start off and be extremely brief?
I will be brief in just saying that I know I'm was joining Councilmember Walker on a working group for Measure P. We had the air show this last weekend, the food festival the night before. I would just like to highlight to folks, if you don't know about the food festival, I highly suggest you go. Fireworks, music, food, it's great. And with that, I'll keep it short.
That fire truck was pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah.
my
There was
goodness.
oh, that's right. That's right. With the jet engine behind it.
I'll be extremely brief. Air show is great. Working on Measure P, working group with Cheryl, and we'll be forwarding recommendations at our next meeting.
I was invited to join, to have dinner with, it says dinner with the Blues, the Blue Angels, and I'm not sure who was going to be there, so the pilots were not there, some of the crew was there, but we had a small intimate dinner at the hospital. Obviously I asked the Angels, the Blue Angels, the crew, what they thought about El Centro and what can El Centro do to continuing showing our appreciation for their being here and their contribution to our economy and our way of living. And so they were nothing but complimentary about El Centro. They really love to be here, and they think this is the best place to be. So that was kind of special. The air show was, I think I've gone now for the last 5 or 6 years in a row. I did notice that the traffic getting into the base was a lot less difficult and faster than in previous years. So because of that, I ended up arriving really early because I anticipated like 2 hours of traffic. Only took me 10 minutes to get there. Also attended the State of the County address in Brawley. All I'm going to say is it was very interesting.
So just a couple of things. Have you guys been getting these Federal Express packages from Spectrum?
I received one.
Okay, so I don't understand why they have the money to send people, multiple people, Federal Express envelopes with their propaganda when they can't respond to the community in a way that's appropriate with regard to what they put us through last year. So I plan to send all of this stuff back some way, postage, due or something. But I just think that that's just a sign of how outrageous the
Well,
Spectrum
Madam
folks
Mayor,
are.
so I didn't feel the impact of Spectrum because I don't have Spectrum, I had DirecTV. But now DirecTV has blocked
Right.
NBC and CBS.
I'm missing NCIS and SWAT.
Because of the same kind of contractual
Right.
issues that Spectrum had.
Yeah, well, maybe you too will start getting Federal Express packages from DirecTV. I had the opportunity to do a couple of things, so on my vacation, which my husband finally turned to me and said, do you ever really go on vacation? So I spent a week in London, and I had a chance to go back and kind of revisit a study that SCAG had done a few years ago on congestion pricing, where you charge people to come in and out of downtown as a way of reducing congestion in tightly controlled areas. Like the areas that we studied were London and Milan, and they're looking to do the same thing in California, like a target or a project, right? And they're looking at maybe somewhere in Southern California to do that. The way it's supposed to work is you charge a fee to go into the city center and use that to improve public transportation for everybody else. So it's kind of interesting to go back and get an idea as to how that all is coming together. And then this past week, from Thursday through Sunday, I was at Yosemite Leadership and Policy Conference that was sponsored by CalCog, which is the California Association of Councils of Government, and then also LGC, which is the Local Government Commission. And there was just some phenomenal takeaways in terms of workforce development that I want to share with our own workforce development group. Some interesting things with regard to RENA, and people are asking us to just blow up RENA now that we've got stabilized transportation funding. They just want us to do an absolute overhaul of the process and make it a lot less burdensome. And then the other thing that was very interesting is West Sacramento took a look at their entire bus route and pulled out a couple of the less popular ones. And now they're providing like door-to-door service, well, not quite door-to-door, with like 8 Mercedes vans. It's essentially a van pool. You call them up and I think they charge, I can't remember, it's like $4 or something, to take you from point to point and bring you back home. And it's been, just a monumental success. So they're looking maybe to do more, take off more bus routes and transition those to this van-type service for residents. So I think we're going to do a pilot project like that in maybe Calexico. We'll see, through ICTC. Oh, and I was elected as first vice president of CalCog. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. I had the wonderful opportunity of presenting a plaque and designating a day as for the 100th anniversary of the founding of the American Legion. That was a great event. That was locally here in El Centro. I also had the opportunity of attending the air show. It was a wonderful turnout. They had just, they did an exemplary job, and of course I have to echo Mayor Pro Tem's comments regarding how easy it was to get on the base. They definitely, getting off, had no problem, yeah. They really
That's always been
did
the
a
tough one.
great job. They really did a great job. It was in and out. I've been attending for years, and this time they definitely got it right. Also attended the State of the County, very entertaining.
I said interesting, I didn't say anything.
It's a good message. We have a lot of stuff going on in the county, and it's nice that there's a little levity from time to time. But other than that, I'm going to keep it short. I'm sure that everyone wants to go home. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Perfect.